and changing some systems.
This is your chance for a better Winnipeg.
It's a balance between public safety and protecting those who are consumed by addiction.
Get out of your silos. Get down and hear what someone else is doing in this area.
So it's not only about talking, it's about doing it.
We need to unite. We need to come together.
We want to just build a city that people are really proud of living in.
Everything we need is all here. It's all right here.
Citizens want a new governance model. They want new engagement strategies from the city.
I want people to give us a clean slate, brand new.
It is 8 p.m. in Manitoba. Voting stations across the province have just closed. Ballots have been cast for mayors, reeves, councillors, and school board trustees. We are in for what could be a tight and exciting race to see who will become the next mayor of Winnipeg. We will also update you on some of the key races outside the city. Welcome to Winnipeg Votes. You may be watching us on CBC television, online at cbc.ca/Manitoba, on our CBC Manitoba Facebook page, or on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. However you're joining us, we're glad you're here. Good evening. I'm Janet Stewart. No matter who wins tonight, we will see a major change in the level of government which most directly impacts the lives of Winnipeggers. We are guaranteed a new mayor and new faces on City Council. Joining us with analysis as the evening unfolds is Christopher Adams, adjunct professor of political studies at the University of Manitoba and, of course, author of Politics in Manitoba. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Janet. It's great to be with you. You know, we've been through a marathon watching this campaign starting in the springtime through June, July, August, September. We're now into later October, knocking on winter's door. And we've seen the stretch of the candidates, all 11 of them stretching out into a long line. And now we kind of have a sense of who the front runners are. And tonight we'll be able to see which one the CBC calls for tonight's election.
And as those early results start to pour in, Chris, what will you be watching for?
Well, I'll be watching really the front runners who I think when we saw the very few polls that were done this campaign, I'll be looking at Scott Gillingham, Glenn Murray, Sean Loney, Kevin Klein. Those are really the forefront. And then there are other ones. Maybe there'll be some surprises. We'll be seeing if any of them come up and into that front running group. But I will be looking to see really those front runners. And has Murray held on to that lead that we saw in the polls?
We have reporters standing by to bring you news from wherever it develops in the city, those surprises Chris was referring to help us make sense of the election results. We also have teams at the headquarters of the main contenders for the job of Mayor of Winnipeg. Bartley Kivas is at Glen Murray headquarters at the Fort Garry Hotel. Sam Sampson is at the Clarion Hotel, where Scott Gillingham has his election night headquarters. Alana Cole is with Kevin Klein supporters at Assiniboia Downs, and Austin Gravish is at Sean Loney's election night HQ at the Norwood Hotel. Ultimately, what we report on tonight are the decisions made by voters like you. So we asked a number of young voters to join us tonight in what we're calling the Winnipeg Votes Cafe. They'll share their views with CBC's Faith Fundahl. Faith?
Janet, young people from all parts of Winnipeg, even beyond the perimeter, are here. They're to my left and to my right. First-time voters, some who have done this before, some new to Canada, and others new to civic elections, Winnipeg style. They are all active in their communities, and they all have a vested interest in our province. You're going to hear what they're looking for, who they voted for, and what they expect of the people who will eventually sit in those council, trustee, and mayoral seats. Not everyone here agrees with everything except for one thing. They care about where we are heading. So stay tuned, Janet.
We will, Faith. Thank you very much. For insight on what the new mayor and councillors will face at City Hall, CBC Information Radio host Marcy Marcusa will join us throughout the evening with a couple of very special guests. Who's with you, Marcy?
Well, some people that want to know how everything's going to turn out tonight, but they also want to know who they're going to be working with come next week. What a distinct pleasure on election night to have councillors with me. And that is because my panel has two acclaimed councillors. Welcome, Marcus Chambers. Congratulations, acclaimed in St. Norbert, St. River.
Thank you, Marcy. It's a pleasure to be here tonight and not in front of the masses waiting for the results to come in to see if I've been elected.
Yeah, I bet a very different night from 2018 for you. And Debbie Sharma, you've been through 3 of these nights before, waiting for that. You've been a councillor since 2010, acclaimed in Old Kildonan. Congratulations.
Thanks, Marcy. Great to be here with you.
What are your feelings about tonight, just the campaign, and if you had to put a couple words to it?
Yeah, feeling very curious, Marcy, and hopeful for the future.
And how about for you, Marcus, thinking about the campaign and also the state of the city?
Very optimistic. We'll have new leadership at City Hall, and with this renewed mandate, we'll be able to roll up our sleeves and get to work for the citizens of Winnipeg.
So you're going to have a new mayor, which is going to be, a new leader, someone to set the tone, and 2 new councillors, because of course sitting councillors have decided to run for mayor. But also tonight, just personally speaking, you were both saying that you're not going through your own jitters because you don't have to wait for your own results to come in. So why don't we take a second to thank some supporters? Who do you want to give a shout out to, Marcus?
I want to thank my mom and dad, Milton and Lynn Chambers, for their support these many years, and my siblings. But of course, my wife Judith and my 2 sons and my beautiful brand new daughter-in-law, who are constantly, there for me and making sure that I'm taking care of myself as well.
Yeah, and it's a big job being a councillor, right? Because you're in public service. You have to make sure you take care of yourself. Debbie, let's get last word to you. Who might be watching tonight?
Yeah. Well, my entire family here in Winnipeg and my family in India, Mullampur, India. We have my family watching CBC Live here tonight. Very curious about our elections here in Winnipeg.
That's so cool. I know you were sharing with me that you were just there this spring and actually doing a presentation at university about being in politics in Canada. I also know that you're fluent in Punjabi, right?
Yes, I am.
Do you want to say hello?
And thanks to my parents, Sushil and Suman Sharma, that have taught me. Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal.
We're going to have a lovely night. And thank you so much for being with us here on CBC tonight on a night that is so important to you both for what your futures will be, what your next 4 years are going to look like at work. And so, Janet, let's go back to you and find out how things are going to unfold.
Thank you, Marcy. We will be paying a lot of attention tonight to the mayoral race in Winnipeg, but we know there are some interesting races happening outside the perimeter as well. CBC's Marjorie Dowhouse has her eye on those developments for us. Marjorie, what will you be watching for?
Well, Janet, we're going to be taking a look at communities outside of Winnipeg. Of course, it's not just a civic election here. It is a civic election right across Manitoba. Of course, keeping an eye on Manitoba's 2nd largest city, that is Brandon. There are 2 candidates running to replace Mayor Rick Crest, who is not running for a 3rd term. Taking a look now at Dauphin, where this is going to be the first mayoral race that the town is going to see since 2010. We have 2 candidates running in Dauphin there to replace Alan Dohan, who passed away last year. We're also going to be taking a look at Winkler. Martin Harder is not going to be running for mayor. He's stepping down after 16 years. There are 2 candidates running there. We have 4 candidates running in Portage-La Prairie. You can see the candidates who are running here. They're looking to replace Irvin Ferris, who is not running for a 3rd term as mayor. He served 8 years as mayor. Where we might not see change is in Thompson, the hub of the north. The incumbent, Colleen Smook, is running for mayor there again against 2 other candidates. Colleen Smook winning her 1st term in 2018, Thompson's first female mayor. Now, these aren't just the only communities we're going to be keeping our eyes on. We're going to be keeping in touch with all the other storylines happening outside of Winnipeg, and so stay tuned for that. Janet?
Thank you so much, Marjorie. There are 11 candidates hoping to capture enough votes to make them the next mayor of Winnipeg. Chris Adams, what jumped out at you during this election campaign?
Well, clearly, Glenn Murray was the front runner. He had been a previous mayor here. A lot of people don't follow civic election news or city council news, so he had a clear advantage early in the spring coming in. People recognized him. Probe Research and Main Street Research, they did polls. He was clearly the front runner. So as we moved through the campaign, though, other candidates started to be what better known. And we saw some polls, 2 polls in the fall that showed that his lead was declining. So the question is, can Murray hold on to that lead that we saw in those polls? So that's really one of the things. Also, 11 candidates, I thought, That's a pretty tough thing for voters to keep track of all 11 candidates and what are they doing for their pledges. So that's been something for us to watch. And thirdly, Janet, and finally, is that without an incumbent, we didn't have Brian Bowman running again. So that meant it was an open race for people to come in. So all those dynamics and others made for a very interesting summer and fall for political scientists to watch.
Absolutely, and for a news junkie like myself.
Yeah.
Now, of course, before Glenn Murray stepped into the race, Scott Gillingham was likely feeling quite comfortable with the endorsements he had. He'd left his seat on Winnipeg City Council in the spring to focus on his run for mayor. We have our Sam Sampson at Scott Gillingham's headquarters tonight. How are people there feeling, Sam?
There's a lot of optimism right now, Janet. Of course, the polls just closed, numbers are starting to come in, and someone who's paying a lot of attention to those numbers is Luke Lewandowski. So Luke is the campaign manager for Scott Gillingham. You've known him for a long time, even before he was a councillor. Who's Scott Gillingham? Who is this guy? If people never heard of him, what kind of guy is he?
I think Winnipeggers are discovering over the last couple of weeks who he is, and it's very much what you see is what you get. Scott's, small town Manitoban boy, grew up on a farm not far from Carman, Manitoba. He's lived in Winnipeg for 20 years now, and two-term councillor from St. James. I think over that time he's really earned a reputation amongst colleagues and people that really know City Hall as someone who's respected, dependable, hardworking. He wants to bring consensus on a lot of issues.
You were saying what you see is what you get. Why would that make a good mayor for Winnipeg?
I just think the thing about Scott Gillingham is what you see is an inherently just decent person. He's a good listener. People often say that. Scott is someone who will go into a meeting and it doesn't matter who it's with. He doesn't assume he's the smartest man in the room and that he knows all the answers. He wants to sit down, talk to people, and come up with the solutions to the problems of the city.
Quickly, what's your vibe tonight, Luke? You and I have been talking for months during the campaign. Are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you optimistic? What are you feeling?
Very excited. And, I talked to Scott earlier this afternoon, and he was just saying he's very proud of the campaign that we've run together, and that he's happy and feels that he's had a lot of fun. And because of that, that as campaign manager, that's all you're hoping for. But no, we feel quite confident tonight, and I hope Winnipeggers are going to feel that as well.
Quite confident. You heard it here. Now, Luke, you have to go and pay attention to those numbers coming in. So thank you very much for your time. Thanks. Janet?
Thanks so much, Sam. Sean Loney was the very first person to declare his intention to run for mayor. Tonight, he and his supporters are gathered at the Norwood Hotel to watch the results come in. That's where you will find our Austin Gravish standing by live. Austin?
Janet, there is an electric energy here at Sean Loney's campaign headquarters inside the Norwood Hotel. The room here has quickly filled up with his dedicated volunteers. They were hard at work all day today, actually knocking on doors, doing some last-minute campaigning. They were also out on the street. We saw them on some of the roads holding up their signs. He's run a really interesting campaign, given that he's a first-time mayoral candidate, and yet he was able to capture about 14% of decided voter support, according to one poll at the end of September. He's addressed some issues like homelessness during his campaign. One thing that stood out to me was that he said if he was elected mayor tonight, he would have housing for people who are living in bus shelters in Winnipeg within a year. Now, Mr. Loney is expected to arrive here shortly. Everyone here has been told to prepare for him walking in, and we're expecting a lot of cheering, and we'll see how he ends up doing tonight with that 14%, or if he gets even more support tonight from voters. Janet?
Thank you so much, Austin. Austin Grabish reporting live there. Kevin Klein has positioned himself as the tough-on-crime candidate for mayor in this race. Alana Cole is at his election night headquarters at Assiniboia Downs. Alana?
Well, people have been arriving here for the last little while, including Kevin Klein himself. So, Kevin, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, it's a big night. How are you feeling?
Oh, I feel fantastic. I wanted to get here actually a little earlier and spend some time with all the volunteers, because it really has been about the volunteers. We've had such a great crew, and listening to the phones today and the messages on social media, it's been really exciting. So I wanted to make sure I was a part of it with the team.
So really, how have you been able to connect with Winnipeggers throughout this campaign? There are 11 candidates on the ballot. What have you guys been doing?
You know, this time we went to the candidates. So we did over 60 community meetings, town halls, if you will. We visited community centers throughout the entire city, sometimes twice. We were able to go to various mature resident buildings and apartment buildings throughout the city. We did a Facebook Live. We've done actually more than one Facebook Live. We've had a phone number on the site that they could call, and I would call them back. And we've been communicating online through email and social media. So I really feel like we've connected with a lot of people this election, because we really tried to make it about getting in front of people and hearing from the residents themselves.
And so, you know, you really focused in on crime quickly. Why is it that that's what you've zeroed in on in this campaign?
Because I don't think it's no secret that most people in Winnipeg are concerned about the crime. Crime is increasing. We find that more and more kids are being lured by gangs now in the city. It's getting to a very critical level. You can see crime has now moved out from the downtown. It's moved out into the suburbs. And that is the biggest issue I heard while talking to residents at town halls and knocking on doors.
Okay, well, good luck tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Back to you, Janet.
Thank you so much, Elena Cole there with candidate for mayor Kevin Klein. Glenn Murray has been sitting at the top of the polls since he announced in June that he was entering the mayoral race. Bartley Kivas is at his election night headquarters at the Fort Garry Hotel and joins us now live. Bartley?
Janet, I'm in the Provencher room. This is the site of a lot of celebrations here, and this is where Glenn Murray is holding his Volunteer Appreciation Night. In fact, Terry McLeod, who is the spokesperson for Glenn Murray and to some degree, came up and already called it a victory party already prior to us going live on air here. So I am actually here with Sel Burrows, a big Glenn Murray supporter. Sel, you are a longtime downtown inner city activist. You've worked a lot about crime. Why are you supporting Glenn Murray in this campaign?
Because Glenn's the only one who understands that there's no one simple answer. You know, when there's guns and knives and bear spray, we need the police. But we also need really good recreation programs. When we have 13-year-olds knifing people, when years ago there were free gymnastics, there are lots of teams for inner city kids to be part of. And Glenn has a clear understanding that we have to be dealing with, those are the two extremes, all of them. We need to look at ways to get the community involved. The concept of Eyes on the Street, which we've developed in North Point Douglas, is a no-brainer, and Glenn understands that completely.
Thanks very much, Sal. I understand you did speak to a number of candidates before you decided on Glenn.
Yes, I talked to all four of the leading candidates, talked to them about the concept of multiple responses to crime prevention, and Glenn gave me the best answer.
Thanks so much. Sel Burrows, supporter of Glenn Murray. Back to you, Janet.
Thank you so much, Bartley. Well, let's go now to our CBC Winnipeg Votes Cafe and see how our young voters are feeling about this evening.
Thanks very much, Janet. I'm here with Jura, who is a first-time voter, and Tandy, who is not a first-time voter. We're going to talk to you in a moment here, but first to you. You have voted.
Yes.
How do you feel?
I feel very excited to have been able to vote for the first time. I've always been involved in politics and keeping up with them, so it's been cool to be able to vote for the first time.
Did you know who you were going to vote for when you went into that ballot?
Yes, I did. I did some research before I went, and I live in the RM of Springfield, so it's a little bit different than the mayoral race here. But yeah, I knew who I was going to vote for.
May I ask who you voted for?
I voted for Therian, I think Rick Therian, so yeah.
And Tandy, you did not vote.
No.
You're from Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And you said to me in the green room, I don't know anything about what's going on here. What did you mean?
Basically that the politics is just very different here than it is back home. Like even just the voting and having a mayor in this province. Like we have provinces, but we don't have a mayor. So it's quite interesting that that's here. Yeah.
But it's something that you clearly care about and you've been following. Why?
Because I'm part of the community. Because I moved here a year ago, and moving here, I just feel like I've connected and made friends and become part of a family. So it's my community too, at the same time, though I'm new.
Are there things that you've noticed here when it comes to the politics and when it comes to the election that you think that would never happen back home?
I would say just like the campaigning is very intense. Like back home, it's not as intense. people aren't as engaged with the politics sometimes, especially the youth, unfortunately. And I love to see like the cafe and how all of us are getting together. I think it's really cool and fun.
And Jera, we were talking about being engaged. How would you describe how engaged you are? I know you talked about how politics has always been in your life.
I think it's something that's important to me because these issues matter to a lot of people and they directly affect everyone living in Manitoba, right? So it's important to exercise that right to vote as well and be engaged because you can be.
So Jera and Tandy both care about what's going on here. Janet, I know lots of folks watching and listening also care.
Absolutely they do, and so do our panelists who are sitting with Marcy Marcusa tonight. Let's go over there and see how they are feeling as they anxiously wait to see who they're going to be working with.
You know, it's interesting just to build on what we just heard in the cafe, and this will get us into our conversation about what it's like to actually be a city councillor. And what a gift to have you guys here to actually talk about what the work actually is, what the service actually is, the job. But I want to read something quickly to you that'll set us up. This came from Molly, and it builds on what we just heard in the cafe. Molly wrote in and she said, "Congratulations today to all of the candidates willing to be good citizens and stand for election." And she goes on to say, "Today we shall vote, a privilege of freedom denied to many the world over." And I just thought that was really poignant because it's not easy, especially in this day and age of social media and divisiveness. And for you, Debbie, what have been some of the toughest things about social media and being a city councillor in Winnipeg?
Social media, Marcy, has certainly evolved, and it can be a wonderful place to share information quickly and widely, but it can also be a very toxic place. And I think a member of the media, you being businesses, residents in general, elected officials certainly, we've seen that toxicity and what it can be like. And it really shouldn't be that way. I think we should show more kindness and have more positive dialogue on these platforms.
Have you had to sort of pull back at times and sort of get back to trying to invite people to really meet with you, to talk with you, versus get on these platforms?
You know what? I'm on certain platforms, but I'm proud of having a community office right in my ward, and I've had that since the very beginning. So there's many ways to engage, I think, with residents: email, phone, and in person.
How about for you, Marcus? What's the role of it been? What have the toughest moments been for you this year when you think about what can sometimes be, we've had divisive environments, to say the least, all over the world, but here in Winnipeg too?
Yeah, you know, I've had some great support, especially on my community Facebook page. But I will share that probably the worst 3 weeks of my life, political life, was during the protests that were downtown. And there was some very visceral comments that were made, and calling me out as chair of the Winnipeg Police Board because there was a perception that police weren't doing enough to end the protest.
So just in our last 30 seconds to each of you, why do you still put yourself forward to sit on council? Marcus, to you first.
I love this city. You know, it's the only city that I've known since coming here as an immigrant, and I see the potential in this city. The potential of this city, it's its people.
And how about you, Debbie?
It's an honor and a privilege, Marcy, to serve and to continue to build this city along with councillor colleagues and, of course, with our residents that also love living here.
Well, we'll celebrate democracy tonight, and we'll see what choices the voters make by the end of the night. Thank you both. Thank you. Janet?
Thanks, Marcy. Let's go over now to our Marjorie Dowhouse, who's keeping an eye on things outside the perimeter. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, Marjorie. Things are quickly changing because this is what's going to happen. We have our first results in with 14 of 251 polls reporting. So this is very early. Would these be advanced polls? These are the 14 polls tonight. We have Glenn Murray and Scott Gillingham in a neck-and-neck race.
Well, there's actually quite a margin there, Janet, if I read the numbers right.
Can we put them back up? Oh, we have to make a quick correction on one of them. Okay. Oh, my goodness. Well, let's talk about tonight and how exciting it is to see early results.
Yes, so the first votes that are counted are the advanced poll votes, so those are the first ones. So when we see the numbers coming in tonight, the first ones that we see will be the advanced polls, and those are counted first, and then they go to the other voting. I don't know how many of the polls would be advanced polls, but at the same time, as we start getting the other polls coming in, different polls in Winnipeg have different social demographic features. As we all know, that's downtown is different than River Heights, which is different than Transcona. So those early polls will be distorted if we rely on those for the full picture of the night.
So what would you expect if there were pockets of support for, let's say, Glenn Murray and Scott Gillingham? Where would you expect those to most show up in the city?
I think Glenn Murray will be more the center part of the city, as will Sean Loney. I think the suburbs will be stronger with Scott Gillingham and Kevin Klein and maybe a few other. But the suburbs are somewhat different than the inner part of the city.
Okay.
But there is a very tight margin there.
What a
Right,
tight,
Janet?
what do we have? 135 votes separating now Glenn Murray, Scott Gillingham, with 14 of 251 polls reporting. So again, and both Kevin Klein and Sean Loney in a dead split there of their votes.
That's right. And so about 5% of the polls are reporting there. And so this is a neck-and-neck race between Murray and Gillingham. It's what some of the pundits were saying might happen, but many people thought Glenn Murray would walk away with this election, but it's looking like that might not be happening. But 5%, 14 of 251 polls, that's 5% roughly. It's early.
So again, we were talking about how this could be a very exciting night and a very tight race.
Yeah.
This certainly shows that, yeah, we were right.
Yeah, and 41,000 people showed up for advanced voting. That was a record. So it is a sign that today and tonight is a sign, actually a good sign for Winnipeg's democracy, of the attention being spent on it.
Yeah. What would you like to see? What do you expect to see in terms of results tonight? As we look at our first ward reporting tonight, this is Charleswood, Tuxedo, Westwood. It is the ward that Kevin Klein left vacant, left available, wide open when he entered the mayor's race. And we see a tight race developing here between Hal Anderson, well-known radio personality, and Evan Duncan.
And just 9-vote advantage for Evan Duncan. Now, Bartley Kivas and I had a debate, and I thought Hal Anderson had the advantage, and Kivas thought the opposite. So we're seeing a competition between two fairly aggressive candidates running in an open race in which Kevin Klein is no longer running in that ward. So,
we have an incumbent in the lead in Daniel McIntyre, Cindy Gilroy, with, at this point, with 14 of 42 polls reporting, what we'd likely see is a comfortable lead.
That's right. We're seeing the incumbency factor, that is someone who held the ward before coming back to run for re-election. Gilroy has held that ward for a number of elections. Infantino is well known in the community. He runs what Enzo's, I don't know if it still runs with that name, but he's well known in the community. And Omar Kanarath had said some things in social media which he recanted. He said he's mature, but it looks like Gilroy will probably hold this ward.
Elmwood East Kildonan is showing results as well. The incumbent, Jason Schreier, showing, again, a comfortable lead over Ryan Kochi.
That's right, and Schreier is a well-known name in Manitoba politics, connected to Ed Schreier, of course, but Jason Schreier has won that ward on his own merit a number of elections. And when you drive down Regent and Nairn Street, Nairn through his riding, he's got signs for the new Louise Bridge. But Schreier is showing the incumbency factor of leading in this ward.
Well, and an incumbency factor.
That's
We're
right.
seeing it here again in Fort Rouge, East Fort Garry, with Sherry Rowlands in a comfortable position, 14 of 47 polls reporting.
And Sherry Rowlands is a well-known name. She's held that ward for a couple of elections. It used to be Jenny Gerbasi held that for a number of wards. It's typically an NDP neighborhood ward, both provincially and within civic politics, and Rollins is well known. So I'm not surprised at that large. She's tripling the opponent's numbers right now.
We have 11 people in the race. Let's not forget how the others are doing. We tend to focus on the 4 who are in the lead, and they would be Glenn Murray, Scott Gillingham, followed by Kevin Klein and Sean Loney. But there are 7 other people who put their necks out there tonight, trying to say, you know, hey, I am also a contender.
Yeah, and they've put their spring, summer, and fall up running, and they've shown up for, most of them have been showing up for all candidate debates. And Robert Falcon-Willett, a well-known name from previous elections, but we will be seeing these numbers come up, but they really are showing that they're sort of on the sidelines right now, those candidates.
Bartley Kivas is right in the thick of things tonight at the election night headquarters of Glenn Murray. Let's see who he has standing by. Bart?
Janet, I have Tom Billis here from the United Firefighters of Winnipeg. You have been supporting Glenn Murray. What does support from the firefighters mean in terms of getting the vote out on election day?
Oh, it means everything. I mean, right from the get-go, we knew Glenn had the skill set, the experience. He's a collaborator, and that's what we need. We had one meeting with the mayor in 8 years. We need a mayor that can, collaborate, work with the province, and fix this fire department. We got problems. We got infrastructure problems. We got problems with our machines. We got staffing problems, and we talked to him. He had the answers.
What were your folks out doing? What were your members out doing today?
Yeah, everything. We were door knocking, we were doing Burma shaves, we were making phone calls, we were calling our own members. We do whatever's asked of us. Our members, I'm proud of them. They stepped up and really got the job done today.
Candidate Murray has promised to get the paramedics out of the fire paramedic stations. This has been a long-term simmering issue between the two workforces. How important was that to you and your members?
Oh, very important. You know what? It's been a long time issue. MGU has said the same, that they want to be separated and have their own stations. So I think it's a win-win. And finally, hopefully, with him as mayor, we can get it done.
We're looking at a pretty close race so far here. Mr. Murray is in the lead. What do you think when you see these numbers as tight as they are at this early junction?
Well, I'm not surprised. The other candidates have put a good effort in, and we knew it was going to be close, right? The early polls were unrealistic, and Glenn had nowhere to go but down. So we're not surprised, and we're just cautiously optimistic like everybody else.
Tom, thank you very much for your time. Janet, back to you.
Thank you so much, Bartley. Of course, the race for mayor is one we're watching closely, but so are battlegrounds within the city of Winnipeg, like Battleground Mynarski. Ross Eady there is the incumbent, but he was expected to be in quite a tight fight tonight, not with Ed Radchenka or Steve Snyder, but with Aaron McDowell. And that's interesting that Aaron is not, at this point, with only 14 of 45 polls reporting, putting up as tight a fight as expected.
I think it's, once again, the incumbency factor, Janet, and people go into the voting station. They might be going in to vote for a mayor, right? But they also have to vote for local candidates. So they just pick a name that they recognize. And Ross Eady is a well-known name. He's been on city council for a few terms. If he gets elected today, it'll be another term. And so I'm not surprised that he's holding a lead.
And of course, Aaron McDowell was his executive assistant for 12 years. So that's why we thought there would be
me too.
some action there. Let's go to North Kildonan, where Jeff Browati, with 4 times the votes almost of Andrew Podolecki, 14 of 46 polls reporting.
Yes, and Jeff Browati is a well-known name. He's been on city council. He's vocal on issues, including the referendum on opening up Portage and Main. He was against that. So he's a no-nonsense, common sense type of city councilor, and I'm not surprised that he looks like he might get reelected with 14 out of 46 polls reporting.
Now let's go to Point Douglas and see how Vivian Santos is doing. Oh my dear, we have a horse race developing here in Point Douglas.
That is interesting. And Vivian Santos was elected. She came last term. She's had troubles with Brian Bowman. She was against vaccinations. She also had troubles in getting along with the mayor, and she's challenged by Mo El Tassi, well-known business person, well-known in the Muslim community in Winnipeg, and connected to Peerless Garments, which is a well-known company here.
And Sergeant Blue Jeans.
Sergeant Blue Jeans, which Mo El Tassi runs. So I'm not surprised those numbers, but it'll be fun to watch for the rest of the night how that goes.
Now, John Orlico may be feeling a little bit more comfortable than Vivian Santos right now, because in the ward of River Heights, Fort Garry, he has a comfortable lead.
That's right. And he originally, you might remember in the spring, he declared that he was going to run for mayor. And he didn't file his papers, but he did decide to run for mayor, and then he decided not to run for mayor, because you can't run for city council and mayor at the same time. So he decided that he'd rather stay on city council than try to gamble.
In St. Boniface, Matt Allard out with, again, a comfortable lead.
Yeah, Matt Allard is a very progressive member of city council, francophone. He running against 2 other candidates. Marcel Bollé suggested that St. Boniface would be separated from Winnipeg if he were elected, to try to make that happen. But Matt Allard, once again, a well-known incumbent, uses social media very well, so this is not surprising that he'd be leading.
So let's go to Waverly West now and see what's happening there. This is a seat Janice Lukes has been the incumbent, and off to certainly a start that she would find comfortable and happy with.
Yeah, and she's very well known in the city. I'm sure people were pressuring her to try to run for mayor as well, but she also has supported Scott Gillingham in this race. She was an early endorser along with Marcus Chambers, who's in our studio today. So she's well known. I'm not surprised that she has this lead right now.
No, in fact, our CBC decision desk is projecting that she will keep her seat in Waverly West.
Okay, there we go.
In that ward. In St. James, interesting, because this is one of those wide open races where the incumbent stepped aside to run for mayor.
Yes, this is Scott Gillingham's past ward, and now we have Sean Dobson it seems to be leading in this. So 5 candidates running, but Sean Dobson is a well-known name in the ward.
With Kelly Ryback being a second at this point, with 14 of 48 polls reporting, so still early in the evening.
Yes.
In St. Vital, Brian Mays sitting with 1,860 counted votes with 14 of 48 polls reporting.
Brian Mays, a lawyer who has sat on City Council. His colleagues on City Council will attest to the fact that he's a hardworking councillor. We're talking off camera with Marcus Chambers about this, and he was talking about Brian Mays as a colleague. And once again, he's the incumbent. So I think voters feel very safe in voting for Brian Mays.
Let's go back to Elmwood, East Kildonan, because our CBC decision desk has seen enough there and projects that Jason Schreier will hang on to that seat.
I'm not surprised, and very visible in terms of his signage and his community. And so actually the incumbency factor is showing itself so far in all the wards that we've looked at tonight, but there will be some wards that we'll see that maybe the incumbency factor won't.
Oh, what a segue, Chris Adams.
Go.
Let's go to Transcona, where in fact 2 candidates have tremendous name recognition. One, the incumbent, the other, someone who represented the ward for quite a long time. Sean Nason, though, the incumbent, a narrow lead in front of Russ Wyatt, who represented the ward for, was it?
Yeah, so both of them are well-recognized names. So it's almost like 2 incumbents when you go in to vote. Russ Wyatt was on City Council a few terms ago, had some difficulties in his life that he's cleaned up. He's also come out as gay, and he wants to be back in politics.
He's come out as bisexual, I believe.
Okay.
I believe. Looking at the mayoral candidates, still a very tight race. Just 253 votes separating Glenn Murray and Scott Gillingham. I'm so glad that the math is not more complicated than that, because I don't know if I could do it on the fly, just the top of my head.
And roughly, 12% of the polls have reported, so we're still quite early. And I'd be interested to know what parts of the city are reporting earlier. But Glenn Murray is showing that he is not as ahead as some of the polls were saying. But we only had 2 fall polls, and those 2 fall polls were quite early in the fall. So this is going to be exciting, probably down to another hour at least to see who wins.
Well, let's go over to our panel, because Marcy, this is just such an interesting night. We've seen a couple of incumbents keep their seat, but some horse races still to watch.
Absolutely, including that race for mayor. So why don't we start there? Because the thing that I haven't shared yet with viewers tonight and with listeners, in case you don't know this, is that Marcus Chambers actually has been backing publicly through your support behind Scott Gillingham. And 253 votes separates Scott Gillingham and Glenn Murray. How are you feeling about that at this point in the night?
Well, I knew it was going to be a very close race. I decided to support Councillor Gillingham in his effort to become mayor. Since being elected myself, his office and my office are right beside each other, and he was my mentor at City Hall. And I'm hoping that throughout the course of the evening, he'll be the leader of our city, and that will bode well for me and the residents of St. Norbert St. River.
Why pull for him? If someone's been your mentor, you get to know them quite well. So what was it in his character that you thought this could be a good leader for the city of Winnipeg at this time? Especially, given that you're a councillor, I'm interested to see why you think that.
From a personal level, he's a former pastor. I'm a pastor's kid. kid, but just his leadership throughout the pandemic in terms of being the finance chair and just watching him operate with grace under fire in terms of what we were dealing with the pandemic. No other candidate, mayoral candidate, has that experience, and I think that's what we need to lead our city forward.
Well, we'll see what happens by the end of the night. Still early, of course. Devi Sharma, you're watching a whole bunch of council races. People might not really realize we think of councillors representing the people, and so you do in your wards, but you work together, depending geographically in the city. So you have your eyes on some of the some of your colleagues in the northern wards tonight. Which races are you watching?
I do, Marcy. We just saw some early results come in. I'm certainly watching the Minarski race, the Point Douglas race, watching the Transcona race. And early results coming in, but we saw a tight race so far in Point Douglas.
Yeah.
And also in Transcona.
Does that tightness in Point Douglas with Vivian Santos and Altasi, who was the candidate that was closest,
Yes.
Does that surprise you, or is that something that you expected in that ward?
The ward is adjacent to mine, so I get an opportunity to drive through it quite a bit and walk through it. And I saw a lot of signs up, really, for both of those candidates, which means they were both out pounding the pavement. And I do care what happens in that North Winnipeg area, because we work together on what's called the Lord Selkirk West Kildonan Community Committee, work together on many files that are important to the North. So I'm watching closely, but it's early results still.
And the committees that you would work with, or the councillors you would most work with, the Marcus Chambers, are in the other part of Winnipeg, in the south. And so you work a lot with Janice Lukes and Waverly West, I understand?
Well, no, I do.
Yep.
But in terms of the Real Community Committee, it is Councillor Mays and Councillor Allard. And both look like they're in a safe position to return back to City Hall.
You're watching, though, Transcona.
Watching Transcona, there's an interesting race going on there with Russ Wyatt and Sean Nason. And it'll be interesting to see how that evolves throughout the evening.
Name recognition, is that a frustrating thing? Like, especially, I'd love to ask the both of you, because you run. Is that something that's frustrating because you're trying to sort of be in there and put yourself forward, and you know that someone that has name recognition can just, have their name recognized, and maybe you feel like you campaigned harder, but you're gonna be in tough. How hard is that?
Well, for me, when I ran in 2018, it was a brand new ward, so there was no incumbent. But I do recognize the power of incumbency. It can go either way, though. I mean, I was talking to a former mayor just the other night from Vancouver who said that in the Vancouver elections, there were incumbents that were defeated. So certainly there is that potential where they can be defeated, but it does have its power.
It certainly does. If you look statistically, I think incumbents often come out on top. But tonight, we're seeing some of them challenged. So back to Janet and to Chris for some more results and analysis.
Thanks very much, Marcy. Let's go to St. Boniface, see what's happening there. We've got some results coming in, I understand. Matt Allard, our CBC election desk, is projecting that he will keep that seat. Again, the power of the incumbency.
And that's not surprising. He's a very present person. He campaigned very hard in this election. You could see his signs all over the place. And he's quite vocal on issues regarding public transportation and things like that. So, and he's a francophone, French and English, in a ward in which many francophones still live.
And to Fort Rouge, East Fort Garry now, where again Sherry Rowlands is maintaining her seat tonight.
And very active in a ward that's very close to the NDP, whether provincially or Sherry Rowlands has a connection to the party as well. She replaced Jenny Gerbasi, who was a very progressive candidate before in previous terms.
The power of the incumbency with Brian Mays here, re-elected in St. Vital.
And no surprise there, he's a well-liked councillor. Highly present, knocks on doors, campaigning for quite a while, and he's well liked by his co-workers on City Council.
It is such an interesting thing to see Jeff Browati again elected in North Kildonan, the power of the incumbency. Let's talk about the power of standing up against an incumbent.
Yeah.
And how that takes personal strength and a lot of cash as well.
Well, sometimes people run, and if you look at some of their websites aren't very well built. Some of them have well built websites and social profiles. But there are candidates who have not really done. They just put their hat in the ring, put their deposit and signatures. But there are some who, with very little chance to win, have put aside their jobs, their family commitments and things like that. And all power to them for doing that. And
that's what we need to keep our democracy fresh and to give us races, to give us things to talk about. I think John Orlico easily maintaining River Heights Fort Garry, but hats off to Brant Field and Gary Lenko and everyone else who competed.
That's right. And John Orlico, is no surprise that he's won this. He's held it for a number of terms. And the name Orlico is a well-known family in Winnipeg, both for his father and his brothers. So not surprising that John Orlico is holding on to his ward.
Let's go to Mynarski and see how Ross Eady is doing maintaining Mynarski. We see him there with 2,376 votes. And 38 of 45 polls reporting. So our CBC Decision Desk says, yes, he is keeping his city council seat.
Yeah, so, and I see Aaron McDowell isn't even in second place. He's in third place in that race. But 38 of 45 polls reporting, but the projection, of course, that Eady has won. And so no surprise. And he will be a thorn in whoever's elected as the new mayor, because Ross Eady speaks his mind and is quite an independent character on city council.
So interesting to see whether he will work with these people well. Glenn Murray again leading now by 1,500 votes over Scott Gillingham.
Yeah, so the margin's widening there, Janet, and by over 1,000 votes right now between the two. So as we move into the evening, we'll see whether that's an established pattern. 83 of 251 polls reporting, so there's still quite a lot of voting to be counted.
And as you were saying, it depends on where those
That's
polls
right.
that have already reported are. Let's go now to our CBC Votes, Winnipeg Votes Cafe, and hear what our young voters are thinking about tonight's results.
Janet, I would say if you probably heard it not long ago when the numbers came up, there was a pretty big, how would you describe it, Georgia? Is it a sigh or was it how would you describe what people did here?
I would say it was very close. I wasn't really surprised by how it's going right now.
What do you mean?
Just from watching, I watched the debate. I didn't follow Murray or Gillingham campaign too closely, but when watching the debate, I thought those two just brought an element of almost professionalism that I didn't really see in the other two candidates.
What are you feeling as you see those numbers? I mean, they're fairly close. Right now we're at 1,500 vote difference. What are you thinking?
I am just on the edge of my seat. I think in a city election, things can just change so quickly. We don't really know what's going to happen between those two.
When you were heading to vote, did you know who you were going to vote for?
I did, yes.
And may I ask who you voted for?
I voted for Glenn Murray. Okay. Yes.
So you're seeing that the candidate you voted for is continuing with the lead?
I am, yeah. Yes.
What is important to you? I mean, we're seeing these numbers go back and forth. What are you hoping, whoever wins, what's the most important thing to you?
For the city, I just want to get Winnipeg back to a place that we're proud of. I see a lot online on TikTok. There'll be a video of something bad that's happened, and a lot of people are commenting, must be Winnipeg, must be Winnipeg. Let's get back to a place where we're proud of our city, where we love where we come from.
What does that look like to you? What would it be like for you in real concrete terms of you being proud about Winnipeg?
I think it comes from downtown. I think a lot of the big cities, downtown is just it's the heart of the city, right? If downtown is thriving and it's great, people want to go downtown, and that's just how the city's going to grow and expand. But we have to get it to a place where people want to be down there.
And what I'm hearing you say is that's not at all the case right now, from what you're seeing.
I still like downtown. I go to school downtown. I mean, I like elements of it, but if I were to be by myself at night, there's a part where I don't feel safe. Yeah.
Well, we're going to keep watching, so thank you, Georgia. Janet, those numbers will continue to come in, and take a listen to the sounds that we make here in the cafe.
Oh, I'm listening. Don't worry, Faith. Thank you so much. Sam Sampson's also listening. She's at Gillingham headquarters for this election night. Sam, what are you hearing?
Well, right now, of course, we're hearing just how close the race is. About 1,900 votes between Glenn Murray and Scott Gillingham. Glenn Murray right now in the lead. But I have someone here who really wants to see that flip right now. Colleen Munro, part of the Gillingham campaign, a big fundraiser here, and also a big name in the construction industry in Manitoba. Colleen, tell me why you want Scott to be the guy.
You know what, I think Scott is a politician that comes around once in a lifetime, and I think to have somebody today that's got honesty, integrity, and has the capabilities to actually pull together the city and have a team that they can actually make something done, that's why I wanted to get involved.
What do you think of how tight the race is right now?
Well, it's a little bit hard on the heart for the tight race, but I think it's early on in the race, and I'm just hoping that, the right thing and the right person will win.
You use the phrase nerve-wracking. Is that still going on in your heart right now?
Well, you know what, I think that, sure it is, because, when you put a lot of time in, and I truly believe in what Scott's doing, and I think his belief for the city is the best for all what we need for the city. Yeah, it's nerve-wracking because you want the right thing to happen.
Well, there's always that joke of Winnipeg. We have 2 seasons. We have winter and we have construction, and you are a big name in the construction industry. Really quickly, what do you want to see from the city when it comes to construction?
Well, I think, we obviously want dedication for our road infrastructure. I think it's been left far too long, and I think that Winnipeggers now definitely want to put money and put focus on that. But again, I think it's not just about my industry. I think there's a whole bunch of areas in the industry and other industries that Scott needs to address, and I believe he will.
Thank you so much for your time. That's Colleen Munro, once again, a big name in the construction industry here in Manitoba. Scott Gillingham supporter, of course. Really tight race. We're going to be paying attention to those numbers. Janet?
Yes, we are. Thank you so much, Sam. And let's go to the numbers now. Let's see how those mayor candidates are doing. We see now almost a 2,000 vote lead for Glenn Murray over Scott Gillingham, with still fewer than half the polls reporting.
Yeah. So one of the things I was going to be watching for tonight was whether Kevin Klein would be pulling votes away from Scott Gillingham and whether Sean Loney would be pulling votes away from Glenn Murray. And it looks like both Loney and Klein are receiving about the same number of votes, roughly. But Glenn Murray looks like he's widening the gap over Scott Gillingham. We'll have to see how this goes with over 100 polls still to report.
It is still a tight race, and it is interesting how those two pairs of candidates are fairly close in their numbers. Let's go now to Point Douglas and see what is happening with the race there. Our CBC election desk has projecting that Vivian Santos will keep the ward.
Well, one of the things with Vivian Santos, as you remember, Janet, earlier this evening, it was really a neck-and-neck race between Mo El-Tassi and Vivian Santos.
Yes, it was.
And I think those are the advanced polls, and it looked like Mo El-Tassi got those advanced voters out better than Vivian Santos. But then with the incumbency factor, here I'm speculating, as the regular voters of today walked into the voting booth, they voted for the incumbent today.
Yes. And now, our panel, is that where we're going? We're going to our panel. Marcy, are you ready? We're throwing
We are ready. We are ready, and we have been watching. And the councillors with me tonight, both acclaimed in their awards, so they're able to be with us here at CBC tonight in our downtown studio. Marcus Chambers and Devi Sharma. You've watched a number of your colleagues get re-elected, as you heard. Orla Schreier, Rollins, Edie, Santos, just most recently, where we have projected. We still are waiting, though, to see who will become mayor, and we still are waiting to see who's going to fill the council seats where there was no incumbent. No matter who is here at the end of the night, who makes up council and who's the mayor, what are they going to actually be walking into? Because we hear about polls, we hear about what voters are concerned about, but on a daily basis, you walk in to be city councillor, and what is sort of top of the agenda? Marcus?
Well, I mean, I continue to campaign and to listen to residents throughout this election process, and people are saying to me that it is the homelessness, the addictions, the mental health that are a concern to them. But I've also heard that our road infrastructure is critically difficult right now in terms of navigating around the potholes. This past winter, we've seen a record amount of potholes, and it's just had an impact on people's vehicles and just their commute back and forth.
Yeah, it's one of the worst years ever, right? I mean, everybody out there drove over this.
So that's a big issue that I've been hearing at the doors, and something that the new councillors will be walking into, and just the difficulties we had financially post-pandemic.
Yeah, and that's going to be another thing. How is whomever is going to be in power tonight or get elected tonight going to pay for everything? Debbie, from your perspective, from your desk as a councillor, what are those big issues in Winnipeg that you really think that whoever comes in as mayor tonight is going to have to put at the top of the list?
Just as my colleague just said, city services are very important. Things like snow clearing, road infrastructure, active transportation, getting better transit service. Those are all things we're going to need to work on and work collectively on. Homelessness, addictions, we know it's top of mind for everyone. And so it's coming together as a council, working collaboratively before we set that next four-year budget cycle. But that leadership will start at the top with the new mayor.
It's not enough to hope. Like we're in a place in Winnipeg right now where we're talking about the financial challenges and we talk about we need to have hope in the future of the city, but we're in serious times right now. What concerns you the most that you really hope is addressed when it comes to making Winnipeg a better place for all of us to live and and be with our families and friends?
Well, now is the time to build relationships with both the provincial and federal government to ensure that we're drawing down the dollars that we need to address the critical gaps that we're facing financially.
So those partnerships will be important.
Those partnerships are critically important. We didn't have that for many years, under the previous premier. So building those relationships now and working in collaboration with the other levels of government, recognizing that there is only one taxpayer.
Janet, back to you.
Only one taxpayer indeed, and which mayor will be planning our course moving ahead. We have such a horse race going now. We see now that Sean Loney has moved into third place, but the race tonight is between Glenn Murray and Scott Gillingham. Now a divide of 800 votes?
Roughly, and it was around 2,000 last time we looked at the board. So this is turning into an interesting evening, Janet. Only 140 of 251 polls reporting. So we're only halfway there, roughly, or just over halfway.
My goodness, and we have had, Murray pulls ahead, and then Gillingham closes the gap. Such an exciting night for people who are watching tonight.
Yeah, and the thing is, the electronic counters this time around, we've had that for a few years now, but instead of people hand-picking, hand-counting, this is electronically, so it should be a faster count.
Well, let's go to Gillingham headquarters where our Sam Sampson is standing by, and to see that gap narrowing, to see Gillingham pulling closer to Glen Murray must be exciting for people there, Sam.
Well, absolutely. Well, there's a lot of excitement right now. It's a little bit unclear from different forms of communication just how close this race is. And you can really tell at first there was a lot of awe because it seemed as though Glen Murray was in the lead. And then the crowd believed that Scott Gillingham took that lead over pretty much minutes later. And the cheering was pretty loud. And you can probably hear it a little bit now, a little bit more of a lively crowd at the moment. That just shows just how much is on the line, I believe, for people here right now. There are a lot of supporters, a lot of people who donated, a lot of people who helped fundraise, knocked on doors. We keep seeing people come in from polls giving numbers. There's a lot of work that goes into campaigns, Janet, and it really shows just how much investment there is. And we heard earlier from someone who was a key fundraiser for Scott Gillingham here, big name in construction. Different industries are truly paying attention to what Scott Gillingham and the other mayoral candidates are hoping to do here. Another thing I heard Councillor Marcus Chambers talk about people living with addictions, people who are experiencing homelessness. Scott Gillingham has also different ideas for that as well. He wants to triage calls from 911 from police, keeping the violent calls to police services, and then the wellness checks that sometimes we hear about in the news, those will go to more social services calls. So each candidate has different ideas for different industries, and a lot of those industries are represented here tonight. Also interesting for Scott Gillingham, we do have, he has that provincial connection. He's worked on City Hall for 8 years, and so this excitement, it could continue throughout the night. We're going to be watching those numbers pretty carefully. Janet?
Yes, we are. Thank you so much, Sam Sampson, reporting live. We have some fresh numbers to bring you now, showing Scott Gillingham taking the lead from Glen Murray.
Oh, isn't that interesting? 170 out of 251 polls, Janet. So it looks like Scott Gillingham has picked up momentum as the counting has gone on, and that's very exciting for those who are supporting Gillingham on this count. So what looked like a 2,000 vote lead before is now dwindled into the opposite of Gillingham leading.
So this would be a case of it ain't over till it's over?
That's right, and every vote counts, you know, the efficacy of the voter, and I expect that we'll have had higher turnout this election.
One of the things that we've heard mentioned as well is the promises that people make on the campaign trail and how they're going to pay for these. We have two candidates leading here in this mayoral race who have very different ideas on how to do them. One said, I'm going to increase your property taxes, 3.5%. I'm also going to increase your frontage levy, which CBC has calculated. That's a 6.1% property tax increase equivalent.
Yeah.
And the other says, I'm not going to raise your property taxes. I'm going to negotiate a new deal with the province.
Yes, and so the question raises is if you're going to freeze, where are you going to be doing your spending, right? You've had these promises, as Murray did, for a number of things, and where is the money? What happens if the other levels of government don't want to play with the mayor? So it's going to be very interesting. The two candidates, one of whom will be a mayor, how do they deliver on their promises? And I frankly, I think Gillingham had a more practical campaign in terms of raising taxes.
Let's go to Marjorie Dowhouse now, who's keeping an eye on those races outside of Winnipeg, which are very interesting to watch as well tonight. Marjorie?
Janet, yes, we're keeping an eye on what's happening outside of Winnipeg. We do have some numbers coming in. I want to bring your attention here to Thompson, where Colleen Smook is trying to be mayor again of Thompson. Actually, those numbers are not updated. We can tell you that by initial counts, she is actually in the lead right now with 964 votes. Les Ellsworth, who is currently a city councillor in Thompson, has 711, and Ron Matchuk, a former city councillor, 388. Again, initial counts there in Thompson. Colleen Smook is leading. I want to also talk about the numbers in Selkirk because we're getting 20 out of 28 polls reporting. 892 for Larry Johansson, who is the incumbent. Morgan Steele-Semin, 522. Again, that is 20 out of 28 polls that are reporting. What we can tell you is that there are some mayors who were uncontested and will be back at City Council. In Morden, Brandon Burley was uncontested, so he will be back as mayor there. Harv Schroeder in Altona, uncontested, taking over for Al Friesen, who is not running for another term. And in Minnedosa, Ken Cameron has been acclaimed there. So a lot of developments happening around the rural areas, and we'll bring you all the updated numbers coming up, Janet.
Marjorie, thank you so much. Let's go back to the mayoral race in Winnipeg and see what the latest numbers are showing us now. With 204 of 251 polls reporting, we see Scott Gillingham taking a 2,000 vote lead.
It really is something, and we're now over 200 polls reporting. So, you know, we are coming down to the shorter strokes of the count. And so, and as you remember, a few boards ago, Murray was up by 2,000 votes. So it'll be interesting. And look at Sean Loney and Kevin Klein, both over 24,000 votes. And it's going to be some diagnosis afterwards as to where did they pull the votes from and who did they do the most damage to in terms of the two front-running candidates.
There will be lots of talk about that and strong showings for third and fourth candidates.
Yeah, and we'll see what do they do after this election. They all raised their profiles in this campaign.
No, they absolutely did. Well, let's go to some people now who know what it's like to hold a campaign and to sit and watch the numbers fluctuate. Let's go to Marcy Marcusa and our acclaimed councillors.
Debbie Sharma, watching those boards, will come to you as well, Marcus Chambers, but just watching how close it is tonight, Scott Gillingham, your colleague, running for mayor, now some 2,100 votes ahead at this point in the evening. What's the relationship like? Like, what's your reaction when you see that and you think about what the actual relationship is between the councillors and the mayor? What do you look for from a mayor?
Well, obviously, Marcy, we're looking for collaboration with full council, like we've never had before. It's so important because of the issues going on and around our city that are so serious. So collaboration, and that'll start with the mayor. We're seeing the numbers; they're very tight. There's still about 50 polls that have to come in yet. So I guess we're going to wait till the last 10 minutes of this football game.
You were saying this is like it's like a totally game night for you, right?
Absolutely.
Marcus Chambers, you are obviously pleased. I saw your body language get excited when we saw those recent boards come up and Scott Gillingham pulled ahead. You've been supporting him. Why do you think he'd make a good mayor?
Just his leadership. His leadership style is to listen. Scott isn't a person to come out and say he has all the answers. He's willing to listen. He's willing to take all of the factors in before making a decision. And that's what I appreciate about him. It's the exact same style that I work in.
So let me bring something up, because you all both wear different hats, but one of your hats for a long time has been being chair of the police board. You raised this earlier tonight. We've been talking about policing. We're talking about crime in Winnipeg as things that voters in Winnipeg are very concerned about. When you look at, just if we stay with Scott Gillingham since he is ahead, when you look at what he has said during the campaign about what his plans are for the police board moving forward, what in that makes you think that it will be the right way to go? What specific promises do you think are right for Winnipeg?
Well, Scott was chair of the police board at one point as well, and he's indicated through his platform that he, as mayor, would sit on the police board to help us make the decisions that are necessary that help the needs, values, and expectations of the citizens of Winnipeg.
So you feel like he understands the structure well enough that he'll understand how to get things done through the board?
And we've chatted in terms of the changes that are coming through the Police Services Act and pinpointed different aspects of it that we feel would help and enhance the board's powers.
Can you give us an example of a change?
Well, in terms of ensuring that board members that are appointed have sufficient training and will do the work necessary to ensure that all of the interest of policing is well represented.
Well, we're asking you obviously a lot about Scott Gillingham because you supported him openly, and he is in the lead at this point in the night, but we'll see what happens next, and we'll still wait for some of those council races to come in as well. Janet?
Thank you so much. Marcy, in fact, we have one of those council races to declare right now. The CBC Decision Desk says Sean Dobson is once again representing St. James.
Well, that's interesting, and he had served before. It was an open race this time, and it was held by Scott Gillingham, who had defeated him before in a previous race as the wards got reconfigured. So it'll be interesting. A past incumbent now elected in an open ward.
There it is. And Kelly Ryback there in second place.
Yeah.
Worked very hard for a long time on this race. But again, that name that people know.
And if I remember rightly, 35 years as a police constable.
There it is for Tim Dyack.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go now to the latest numbers from the mayoral vote. We see almost 3,800 votes, roughly. Now separating Scott Gillingham over Glenn Murray.
And with only, as I counted, 19 polls to report, but the margin is increased by 4,000. So it's looking like Scott Gillingham is pulling away from Glenn Murray in these counts. And, it's interesting because Scott Gillingham has run as sort of like a centrist campaign, very similar to what Brian Bowman did. So it looks like Scott Gillingham might be doing to Glenn Murray what 2 elections ago Bowman did to Judy Wassilisalis. As the election came on, the centrist candidate began to pull away.
Fun fact that Bartley Kivas let us know earlier in the day, today is Glenn Murray's 65th birthday. He was hoping to have a win as his present. Let's go now to Bartley Kivas, who is standing by at Glen Murray headquarters tonight. Bartley.
Janet, it's a bit of a confusing scene over here because another media outlet called Glen Murray the winner, but now we have Scott Gillingham, according to the City of Winnipeg numbers, up by almost 4,000 votes. That number has been flashed on the screen here. A little bit of confusion here, some cheering, and now a little bit quieter, but there's music going on. So with, according to the City of Winnipeg numbers, now still only 6 polls remaining and Gillingham with a 4,000 vote lead. It remains to be seen what this crowd will do because it remains to be seen what's going on with the election. But I have never been in a place where somebody has called an election and then the lead has switched hands. So you'll have to stand by, and back to you, Janet.
Thank you, Bartley. And let me take a moment to thank the CBC Decision Desk for always taking its time. You know, sometimes in these moments, live news developing, elections developing, there's a push, there's an excitement. You want to be the first one to call something, but you don't want to be wrong. So thank you, CBC Decision Desk, everyone in the background who's taking their time tonight to get it right for you. Now, let's go to our CBC Winnipeg Votes Cafe in just a moment. First, we've got new numbers for you. Our CBC decision desk that takes its time and gets things right says Evan Duncan has taken Charleswood, Tuxedo, Westwood over Hal Anderson, who a lot of people thought had a lock on it because of his name recognition.
Yes, and Evan Duncan had been campaigning for a long time, had the organization, the commitment. Hal Anderson came in with great name recognition, well-known morning host on one of the other radio stations, and people just assumed Hal Anderson would win. People from the outside of that riding, but those who live in this ward, I should call them wards, those who live in the ward were much more familiar with Evan Duncan in terms of a on-the-ground type campaigner.
In Transcona, Russ Wyatt is returning to City Council.
Well, Russ Wyatt, Janet, as you know, is a well-known name in Transcona. The family name is well-known. Russ Wyatt was on City Council for a few terms and then stepped out because of some personal problems, which he seems to have rectified. And Sean Nason was the incumbent. So it was really almost like two incumbents running against each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's check in on that horse race, which is the race for mayor of Winnipeg, with only 6 polls reporting. As Bartley mentioned, we have Scott Gillingham with a 4,200 vote lead, almost 4,200 votes.
Yes, so CBC has yet to project the winner in this, and being very safe about this, and it'd be interesting to see what happens in the next 6 polls, and if it's really close, to see if there may be a recount. But right now, the margin is large enough not to have a recount.
Where does that recount automatically kick in?
Well, I wish I could tell you, but I don't want to make anything up.
Come on, Chris. Come on. Okay, well, let's go to our CBC Winnipeg Votes Cafe and see how our young voters, who we're so grateful to be sharing this evening with, feel about this horse race.
Janet, I'm going to let the folks here tell you how they're feeling. One word, how are you feeling, Jesse?
Deflated.
Deflated, okay. Caleb, what about you?
Oh, it's so like, oh, it just, I talked to someone who said she wanted to like buy a house next year, and now it doesn't seem like she'll be able to do that because Gillingham's has said that he's going to raise property taxes. So, oh my goodness.
So when you see this lead, I mean, first it was Glenn Murray, and now it's changed to Scott Gillingham. What sorts of things come up for you?
Well, I've said since the beginning, or well, maybe not, but what I've maintained is that I would rather Murray win than Gillingham. I didn't vote for either of them, but I would prefer Murray over Gillingham. But and so now it seems to be Gillingham. So I'm just.
What about you, Jesse? You said deflated. What do you mean?
Well, I voted early for Sean Loney, and I kind of wished that I had waited to see the debate and the way things were playing out a little more that they are.
Why?
Well, because regardless of how I might feel about Glenn Murray and some of the personal issues that came up for him, I do feel that he's a better candidate and a better mayor for Winnipeg. And so if I would have known that it would have been this tight a race between the two, I think I would have cast my vote in that direction.
We'll ask you how you're both feeling again. Janet, back to you.
Faith Lindahl, thank you so much. Such interesting views there from our young voters. And good news, Chris Adams, you're off the hook for not, because you see, in the city of Winnipeg, our folks in the decision desk have informed me there is no automatic number.
Okay.
That's why it didn't pop to mind.
Well, I
see, you
learn
know
something
everything.
new every day.
Well, yeah, I learn them from you. So no automatic recount. It has to be something that someone requests. Appeals an answer. So now Sam Sampson is standing by at Gillingham headquarters. Sam.
So, as you may have heard Bartley mention a few moments ago, there has been some confusion about who has won the mayoral race. So we heard, yeah, and then we heard, oh, and a lot of clapping and back and forth. Gordon Giesbrecht is one of those people who have had a bit of confusion, let's say, over the past 10 minutes or so. Gordon Giesbrecht actually ran Scott Gillingham's first shot at politics in 2011 when he made a provincial run for a political position. Gordon, how are you feeling right now, just with the back and forth and how close this race is between Gillingham and Glenn Murray?
Well, I didn't pay much attention to who was saying who won when there's only 100 votes difference. I thought that was pretty silly that they made any kind of predictions. But You know, it just shows the numbers that are most important, interesting to me is like it was 40% to 15% a few weeks ago, and it shows we did it in the last election when Bowman was elected. What happens, you know, a week before, a week is an eternity in politics. So Scott's been at it for 11 years, and I was happy to help him out early on, and here we are 11 years later. And I'm still not going to say who's going to win, but there's a lot more than a 100-vote difference right now.
Well, and it's still really, really close at the moment. So what is at stake here, do you think, for Scott Gillingham to be able to become the mayor?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
That's okay. I'll rephrase it. What do you think is at stake for the city of Winnipeg should Scott Gillingham become the mayor? How would the city change if he's the mayor?
Well, he's had some pretty good ideas about infrastructure. He actually campaigned on increasing taxes, whoever does that, but dedicating that tax to infrastructure. And I think anybody who's driving around on the roads these days or the last 10 years knows that's necessary. So I think that's great. I've been impressed when he first ran for city council. I just overheard him saying, you know, well, it's great to have ideas, but you have to figure out how to pay for it. And he's been chair. I think he's been chair of the finance committee 6 years. And although he jokes that, you know, hey, the good news is I balance the budget every time, but the bad news is that's the law. But anyway, so
you're saying he has the chops to be able to do it?
Yeah, he's got 8 years of experience in City Hall, and so it's not somebody. Nobody's going to be learning how to be, about city politics.
Thank you so much for your input, Gordon.
Hey, thanks.
Back to you, Janet.
Thank you, Sam. Interesting, Chris Adams, to see at the bottom of the screen there the popular vote this evening. We have our two lead contenders fighting it out. Scott Gillingham in the lead with really only 27.4% of the popular vote. Glenn Murray with 25.3%. Close numbers, but fairly low.
So the mayor's elected by a plurality. Who wins the most votes? It's not a majority, but who wins the most votes? I think, if I remember rightly, going back to Susan Thompson in the 1990s, she came in the 30s, percent. This is amazing to have a mayor elected with 27%. If that stays with us, and it probably will. But the one thing, Janet, is going back to the 1940s was the last time we had a mayor re-elected after leaving office and then coming back. And so that pattern is holding if this stays on tonight.
We have 11 candidates. What we are seeing is the division of the vote among 11 candidates.
That's right, and not just two strong running candidates, but Kevin Klein and Sean Loney coming in with some fairly strong numbers in there as third and fourth place.
80% of the vote right there.
Yeah.
80% of the vote. Austin Grabish is standing by right now at Sean Loney's headquarters, Austin. What's happening?
Janet, the mood here has certainly changed from excitement to, I think, a great feeling of unease. People in the room are glued to the screen, and I think there's a big sense of disappointment because a lot of people were expecting a first-place win tonight. People who volunteered on this campaign put their hearts and souls into Sean Loney's campaign, and I want to introduce you to one of those people right now. We have a volunteer standing here right now, and I'm just hoping, Dawn, that you can tell us why you got involved in Sean Loney's campaign. Tell me about that moment that you decided to step up and volunteer.
Well, I actually saw in the news when Sean said he was going to run for mayor for the first time, and he said that he didn't want to wake up when he was 80 or 90 and not have done anything about Winnipeg and the homelessness situation. So I found a way to contact him that day, and I've been involved in his campaign for a year and a half now. So.
And just tell me about the moment that you thought that Mr. Loney could change the city. You were talking about going through Higgins and Main and seeing homeless folks there and how that really bothered you, and you thought Mr. Loney would be changing the city.
Well, from the start, Sean had such a strong vision and the experience to make that vision into a reality. And the people that he gathered around behind him were just so intelligent, so kind, so compassionate, such a wealth of experience. And I just wanted to be part of that vision. So I do drive back and forth from through the downtown twice a day. And it's absolutely devastating to just see that all the time. It's just hard on the heart. I don't want to live in that Winnipeg for the rest of my life. So,
Don Rolke, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Don Roque was one of the many volunteers on this team. You can see a lot of support still here as the room is cheering here for Mr. Sean Loney.
And they're watching our broadcast on a bit of a delay there, so they're cheering because they saw one of their own up on the big screen. We'll talk later, Chris Adams, about how Kevin Klein and Sean Loney may be seen as spoilers for one or two of the candidates here. Right now, let's go to our panel, standing by, sitting by, comfortably watching this, or maybe anxiously watching this, with Marcy Marcusa.
Yeah, it's not so comfortable over here. There's some tension and there's some confusion and there's some questions. As we watch these numbers, we knew it was going to be close throughout the evening, and now we're seeing, of course, a lead for Scott Gillingham. However, it's back and forth. So how do you think that the mayoral candidates must be feeling right now, Debbie?
I think exactly how we're feeling, Marcy. We're on the edge of our seats, really. It's a tight race. There are a handful of polls remaining to come in, so we need to wait till that decision is finally made.
And you've talked a lot about Scott Gillingham, so knowing him, what do you think he's feeling right now?
I think he's feeling reasonable optimism in terms of what the poll numbers are.
Tighter than you thought, though, Marcus?
Tighter than I thought. I always speculated that if he was going to win, it was going to be by a larger margin. It is a tight race. We're in the fourth quarter now, and hopefully these numbers will sustain.
We're actually going back because we have some more analysis right now.
We want to take you to Kevin Klein's headquarters at Assiniboia Downs. We have a live shot there with our Alana Cole and team standing by at Assiniboia Downs. That's Kevin Klein's headquarters for this evening, this election night. Alana, what's happening?
Well, as you can imagine, this is a disappointing night here for supporters of Kevin Klein. They were optimistic, they were hopeful, but right now, Kevin Klein is about to speak. So we are going to pan over to him right now, and you're going to be able to take a look and see he's about to talk to his supporters.
Thank you. Well, good evening. Thank you very much. It seems fitting that we had this event here at Assiniboia Downs because it was a bit of a horse race. So you can see that it's coming in neck and neck. So listen, first of all, I want to thank my wife Heather and all our family. We've got a bunch of the kids here today, Jess, Jazz, and Jay, and Josh. You guys should come up. Come on up. I first and foremost want to congratulate Scott Gillingham. I know they haven't officially called it yet, but it looks like Councillor Gillingham will now be Mayor Gillingham, and I want to give him my full support. I think that it's important that the City of Winnipeg does take this time now after the election and get behind whoever the next Mayor of Winnipeg is. And now that that's going to be Scott, I think we have to get behind that Mayor because we have a lot of problems we still have to fix. We have a lot of issues with crime. We have a lot of young people that are still getting lured by gangs. We have an economy that is starting to fracture in many more places. So I'm hoping that there's some wise moves made going forward by now Mayor Gillingham and my colleagues, former colleagues on council, that they'll pay a little more attention to the budget. They'll pay a little more attention to what money is being spent where, and that they'll work a little bit harder to make sure that the residents of Winnipeg know exactly what's going on. You know, I got to travel this entire city, and I was inspired by people from every corner of the city. And every time that I spoke, I always said that I chose Winnipeg. And I chose Winnipeg because it is the greatest city in Canada. I could have lived anywhere else in this country, and I chose to live here. I'm still not giving up on Winnipeg. I will not give up on Winnipeg. I wish everyone who has been elected tonight to council, I wish them success. I urge them to work hard. I urge them to hold people accountable, and I urge them to do the right thing financially and bring our city back to where we want to bring it. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you for all your help and support.
Kevin Klein, currently sitting in third place of the mayoral race for the mayoralty of Winnipeg, congratulating Scott Gillingham, someone he butted heads with often on council when they both were councillors. Our Marjorie Dowhouse has been keeping a close eye on the races outside of Winnipeg for us tonight. What do you have for us, Marge? What's happening?
Well, Janet, the numbers are coming in slowly, but we can tell you that Colleen Smook has been re-elected in Thompson. 964 to Les Elworth's 711 and Ron Matchuk at 388. So Colleen Smook will be back as Thompson's mayor. Of course, first being elected in 2018, also Thompson's first female mayor. I want to give you an update on other numbers as well, too. In Selkirk, Larry Johansson leading by 1,232 votes to Semon's 678. There are 22 out of 28 polling stations reporting there. And also in Steinbach, Earl Funk will be back as the mayor there, acclaimed. So we're waiting for a lot of numbers still from some of these communities and also keeping an eye on all the other storylines. We'll keep you updated, Janet.
Thank you so much, Marjorie. Marcy Marcusa sitting with our two councillors who know Scott Gillingham, know Kevin Klein very well, worked with them both for years. Interesting to hear what they have to say.
Well, why don't we just start with being human beings here? So do you guys want to say a word or two about Kevin Klein, your colleague who just conceded tonight first, Debbie?
I think those were very nice remarks that he put on the record just now. Shows his maturity and professionalism to get behind who the mayor is going to be and start anew tomorrow.
We're thinking the mayor is going to be still tight in here, but how about you? Words for Kevin Klein?
Well, for anyone that puts their name on a ballot to run for public office, especially knowing firsthand how it can be while you're in office, I have immediate respect for. Councillor Klein is a very intelligent person, and to hear him...
We're now sorry to interject, we're now actually going to hear from another candidate who I understand has remarks being made. Janet?
Yes, it's time to go to Sean Loney's headquarters tonight and hear what that candidate has to say.
I haven't been around as much as I otherwise would in a year and a half, but looks like we'll have a bit more time in our hands the next little while, so that's good. I also wanted to acknowledge our volunteers. My goodness, your city... Your city called you and you answered the call. Yeah. And I want Don and Jessica to come here just as a representative of all hundreds of volunteers working on the campaign. These are our co-managers. Your city called you and you answered the call. Yeah. To the donors, people who donated to the campaign, to people who put up a sign, we had a lot of signs up, and to the voters, your city called you and you answered the call. Congratulate what appears to be Mayor Gillingham. He and I had some issues on the campaign, disagreements about policy. I want to offer him my full support. I think we get along as he knows I have a background in the issues that Winnipeg is really struggling with, and we just want to say it's time to pull together now as Winnipeggers, and I'm fully prepared to do that and want to wish him the best in his new role, and to hope he hits the ground running. And at the top of his list is addressing homelessness, and we're there to provide any kind of support and guidance that we can.
Sean Loney there at his campaign headquarters, election night headquarters, congratulating Mayor-elect Scott Gillingham, which we cannot actually say is what he should be called at this point. We are still waiting for those 6 final polls, and we are sitting with 4,186 votes. Is my math correct there? Between Scott Gillingham and Glenn Murray, it is possible still for Murray to squeak out a win.
It is interesting, and the percentages that we saw, flashing on the boards before, is that under 30% elects a mayor, and we've never seen that historically in Winnipeg. We saw it in the mid-90s, at the high 30s, Susan Thompson, but this would be historic, that somebody winning less than 30%, whether it's Gillingham or possibly Murray, winning with less than 30% historically. And I think many of the people who voted Sean Loney are thinking if they had a second choice, they might have moved over to Murray. So I think there's going to be some thinking among some voters tomorrow as to whether they could have done more strategic voting if they had supported Murray.
Let's go to Sam Sampson now. She is at the headquarters of some very anxious folks, Scott Gillingham supporters. Sam.
Anxious, excited, there's a lot of cheering, much more movement than even a couple hours ago, because at the beginning of the night, people weren't really sure. I'll be honest, we were talking to people, they weren't sure what was going to happen. Now, a bit more of an optimistic feel, and one of the voices of that optimism is Ayodele Odiemi. He is a well-known face to CBCers here, part of a Future 40, part of programs at CBC, and today, right now, he's part of the Scott Gillingham campaign. Ayodele, you were saying that you were helping out Marcus Chambers, who is a known endorser right now of Scott Gillingham. So you were just hyping up the crowd. How do you describe the attitude right now?
The only answer I can give you is I feel assured. I feel all the nostalgia you can even put together in a drink. I can drink it all down and know that today and tonight is the night to celebrate victory for Winnipeg, victory for people that are looking for a change, because this man stands for a change. I work closely with Scott after being on the team with Marcus Chambers as his strategist on social media and helping for the campaign. When he doesn't need the election anymore. He said, AY, go ahead and help Scott. And I said, yes, why not? Because he's a mentor to Marcus. And I read all his profile, everything he has done for the past 2 terms as a councillor. This man stands for a real change.
So what kind of change, though? Because he has been a councillor for 8 years, and some might argue, you know what? We haven't seen change over the past 8 years. So how will he make change for the city as mayor, do you think?
All right, if you're not part of the table, it will be very hard for you to know what to do on the table. He has been at the table. He has been the one in charge of the economy, helping Winnipeg economy not to go totally down while we were facing the 2 years. And now he has brought new big chances for us, changing the dynamics of how our road is going to be repaired faster, quicker. Very big thing is the security. And he said he's going to do this, and I believe every word he said about security, homelessness, all these are major for every Winnipeggers, and this is what I voted for, what everyone that you were seeing tonight voted for, and we can't wait.
All right, now before I let you go, you were rounding up the crowd, you were getting them hyped up. Give our viewers a little bit of that. What were you saying before?
You know, this is just 11:45 p.m. to the time of declaration. It's just 6 more ballots to go. And I believe with the number we have, it is already done. It's a done deal. Scott is our new mayor. Hear it from me first.
I wouldn't go that far right now. Our CBC Decision Desk is kind of the ones we listen to, but I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Back to you, Janet.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sam. Our Faith Fundal all evening long has been chatting with our group of young voters who we pulled in. You know, Faith, what I find exciting through this is all the love and heart that we are seeing on the screen tonight from the supporters of every candidate. People are really putting themselves out there to make democracy work.
Yeah, they are. And it's interesting because as those numbers changed, again, a collective sigh of relief. But you said something, Jamin, that I want you to repeat. What did you say about Scott Gillingham?
Yeah, he kind of feels like, I guess, the safe option in this whole election. I feel like the 3 others kind of had solid ideas of change. Gillingham kind of had that solid, the consistency, you know?
So when you say safe, do you mean safe in terms of policies or safe in terms of it makes sense that that's who's leading right now?
I'd say policies. I think that, I think many of these candidates would have been qualified for it, Scott Gillingham in there as well. But definitely in terms of policies, I don't think there's going to be any major changes to Winnipeg. I think it's just going to be the same solid Winnipeg that we all live in.
Tia, you remember Glenn Murray, the former Glenn Murray when he was in municipal politics. Who do you see now as the now Glenn Murray?
I see him as somebody that I personally wouldn't vote for, just knowing more about his personal life than I did before. If I did do some more, I would say if I didn't do more research, I probably would have gone with the crowd and just voted for Glenn Murray. But I did a little bit more research and I read more news articles, and I read a little more about him online, and now I do feel as though Gillingham, if I had to pick between the two, that he would be the better option for sure.
So stay tuned. We're going to find out if Gillingham will be Mayor-elect Gillingham, Janet.
Thank you so much, Faith. Marcy Marcusa, sitting with our two councillors. Let's go see what your thoughts are.
Well, I'll tell you what, like Chris said, when do we have a too close to call or this close to call in Winnipeg, right? In these margins. It's exciting, it's tense, and we're going to continue talking about a couple of the things to build on what we just heard in the cafe. A lot of people are kind of grappling with who Scott Gillingham is going to be. Should he make it to the end of this? And don't count Glenn Murray out yet. We're still watching that, haven't called it. But should he become the next mayor? What kind of mayor will he be? So you've had him as a colleague. What do you think, Devi, in terms of what he would bring to his actual style in leading the city?
Marcy, we've heard over the last couple of years a lot about the EPC and non-EPC councillors and the divide that it's caused, and really often pitted one ward against another. So I think we'll see a change with that. More collaboration around the table. We've heard that from Scott Gillingham during the campaign. Council Chambers mentioned earlier, he's someone that listens. I've certainly seen that. But again, we're waiting for the final results to come in.
We are.
We need that collaboration amongst all councillors, and we have no choice to really build the city that we want to live in. I think we're going to see that.
How is he, is that different from, and this is not to insult to the previous mayor, Brian Bowman, but in terms of his style, like, is that going to be different, Marcus Chambers? And if it is, why does collaboration matter to the average Winnipegger? Like, if it's working at that level, how does that trickle down into what we feel in the city?
There are 13 elected city councillors and 2 acclaimed that represent the interests of the taxpayers. And so everybody has a voice at the table, and it's up to the mayor to build that consensus in terms of how we move policy and how we shape policy.
And you think Scott Gillingham is collaborative in that way?
Absolutely, 100%. And that's the reason why
we do care about, collaboration. You were saying we don't just live in St. Norbert or Old Kildonan.
Right.
We travel around the city. We want to be in our downtown. So we care what each councillor is doing with one another, right? And with the mayor to build our city and move it forward.
How important is that right now in 2022? Because you brought up downtown. There's huge concerns about downtown. During COVID, people kind of went into the suburbs and where they lived and maybe figured out they didn't have to travel all over the city. How important is this next phase for our city to not only tackle our problems, but to build Winnipeg as one unified place again in some way and recreate that, re-identify ourselves as like people that come from the same place, Marcus?
We have to recapture that momentum that we had in 2019 and prior to the pandemic. We had so many opportunities and so much potential here in this city. And I think Scott is going to exemplify the fact that we now can work together collaboratively to regain that momentum and bring our city forward, taking care of our most vulnerable citizens as well. He has that empathy as a former pastor.
And you think that'll trickle right down?
And that'll trickle right down to how he deals with his council colleagues.
Well, we'll see if he makes it to the end of the night officially and does become the mayor. Let's have a look at where we're at right now in terms of the analysis and results with Janet and Chris.
Thank you so much, Marcy. And here we sit. Here we sit tonight waiting for the final 6 polls to come in. We are speculating wildly, but let's do it. Let's go for it, Chris Adams. Why might we be waiting?
I suspect it's a mechanical problem. As you know, when you go into the voting booth, you slide your ballot into the machine. So I think there's probably a mechanical problem that's happening with these 6 polls. You go historically in Manitoba, we had races in which the canoe, believe it or not, the canoe tipped and the ballot boxes were swamped. So this is more of a modern problem, I'm sure, than we're facing than something back from the 1930s.
I would love to find out that the canoe swamped. I would find
Yeah.
that a very interesting thing, but you're probably right, just
Yeah.
some sort of mechanical issue. Meantime, people are on tenterhooks waiting to find out what is going to happen. Bartley Kives is standing by now live at Glen Murray headquarters, where they desperately want to hear that he's pulled out a win. Bartley, what is the mood there? What's happening?
Well, the mood here is obviously tentative, but I have to elaborate on what you folks were just talking about here. I spoke to the senior election official, Mark Lemoyne. The earliest polls that come in are coming first the advanced polls, then the intercity polls. Then the suburban polls come in later. They physically drive them down to double check them before they post them. This is likely why we saw a Glen Murray lead. Earlier on, more support in the inner city, Scott Gillingham, more support in the outer areas. This is probably why we've seen so far a lead change hands. Now, I am here with Kishwar Mirza. She has been waiting patiently to speak to us. How are you feeling about this? You're a nurse, you're used to tension, you're used to high stakes. How do you feel right now?
I'm really very worried, but I'm hoping that Glen will triumph in this, and we're still waiting for 6 polls, right? So I mean, it's just a very narrow lead still. So I'm hoping he'll come out of it a winner.
You worked as a pediatric nurse throughout the pandemic, and by the way, thank you for your service for us. You have dealt with a lot more tension even than this night. What internally do you feel when you're in this moment waiting?
I feel kind of a little bit stressed, but I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. Because, as you know, with healthcare, you always have to make sure that everything goes well. So we're hoping that everything will go well with this election as well.
And tell me a little bit why you support Glen Murray.
I think he's a wonderful guy. I think he's a great leader, and he's got a huge vision for the city that a lot of the people I think seem to be lacking. And he's been a mayor before, right? And so he comes with a great deal of experience, and I think that's important for us.
Kishwar, thank you very much. And I just want to point out the lowest popular vote percentage of a winner in recent Winnipeg history, and I mean recent the last 6 decades, was Susan Thompson's re-election in 1995 when she had 38% of the vote. So if we end up around 27% for whoever wins here tonight, that is going to be the lowest popular mandate that we've seen for a mayor in recent Winnipeg history. Back to you, Janet.
Thank you, Bartley Kiva. So yes, we could be on our way to making history tonight. And we wait for 6 polls to come in, likely because somebody is stuck behind a train. That's why. Not they're in a canoe and it tipped, as happened in history, but a train. That's my guess. Let's go now to Marjorie Dowhouse and find out what's happening outside the perimeter, where hopefully the trains aren't holding up the count.
Thanks a lot, Janet. Well, we do have some numbers coming in. I can give you some updated numbers. Here's what's happening in Brandon. Jeff Fawcett has pulled out in front of Elliot Olison, 350 votes to 188. There are 5 out of 24 polling stations that are reporting right now. We've got some numbers coming in from Dauphin, where David Boziak has pulled ahead 2,000 votes compared to Kerry Reel's 694. CBC News has just spoken actually to David Boziak, and he says he is elated. So we're going to have more on that coming up on Radio Noon tomorrow. Numbers haven't quite come in yet in Winkler. Portage la Prairie not reporting yet. In Thompson, we did have Colleen Smook there, who has actually won with 964 votes. So all the numbers are in Thompson. The update on Selkirk right now, Larry Johansson, 1,418 votes compared to Morgan Steele-Semin, who has 820 votes. 27 out of the 28 polling stations reporting there. So the numbers are starting to come in, and we will, of course, keep you updated here. Janet?
Thank you so much, Marjorie. Yes, the numbers are starting to come in. Not those numbers for the mayor. We're still waiting for those 6 polling stations that have not yet reported. But let's go through what we do know. We do know that Evan Duncan will represent Charleswood, Tuxedo, Westwood.
Yes, and people thought that Hal Anderson, because of his high public profile, would win that, but clearly a good campaigning beats out sort of public image in this one.
And also, Evan Duncan worked very, very hard. As you mentioned, the good campaigning. Hal was not someone who was going door to door.
And Steve Minion won as having the best picture of the election.
He absolutely does. Cindy Gilroy is heading back to council as well to represent Daniel McIntyre.
And that's not a big surprise. She's been on council for a number of years, and she's well known, and so the incumbency factor playing out there. She was up against a couple of people who had a bit of a profile, including Sal Infantino, who runs a billiard coffee bar, Enzo's, in the neighborhood.
And together, their vote was more than hers.
Yes.
And Jason Schreier taking Elmwood East Kildonan.
And Schreier is a well-known political name in Manitoba politics. Jason Schreier, though, on his own, winning this a couple of terms now. He's been on city council, so he's been elected according to projections, 43 of 44 polls.
Ryan Koshy there, our Red Seal chef, taking 3,000 plus votes. Sherry Rowlands taking Fort Rouge East Fort Garry, holding it.
And at first it looked like she'd win it by acclamation, but Michael Thompson came in. He put in a respectful showing against somebody who's a fairly high-profile ward councillor for this area, and this ward overlaps with strong NDP support in Winnipeg.
We have 5 candidates in Mynarski, but Ross Eady, the incumbent, holding it with 37.79.
And well known, Ross Eady, but people thought that Aaron McDowell, who had worked with him before as his assistant, might put a stronger showing, but didn't. So Ross Eady, no surprise, as the incumbent, was re-elected tonight.
In Mynarski. That incumbency, such an important factor. Jeff Burowati, again, the man best known in North Kildonan, walking away with the win again.
And Jeff Burowati is well known on city council. He's more on the right wing on issues, common sense issues, but no surprise that he's holding this seat. And it's something he's comfortable holding this ward on city council.
Well, let's look through more of the results tonight, again showing Vivian Santos holding Point Douglas.
That's right. She had problems with Brian Bowman throughout her first term in office. We saw Moelle Tassi earlier tonight really neck and neck with her, very early returns, and that was the advanced polls. And so it looks like Moelle Tassi had a very good turnout at the advanced polls, but it didn't work out for the whole election day.
There is so much machinery that goes into running an election, getting people out to the vote, advanced and on the day. Clearly, John Arlico's got that down in River Heights, Fort Garry.
And Janet, he really was running for mayor at the beginning in the springtime. He had a formal press conference, etc. He was running for mayor. But as you know, in Winnipeg, you can't run for ward race and for mayor. So he decided he didn't want to risk his ward position. It's hard to win an election in a ward, so to give that up. So he took the safe route, and he's won very handily tonight.
Yes, he has, as has Matt Allard in St. Boniface.
Yeah, Matt Allard, social progressive, strong connection to the NDP prior to entering the city council, well known, and actually a past student of mine. But that's not why he was elected. He was elected because he's a very hard campaigner, and he's well liked in his community.
In St. James, Sean Dobson, who represented part of this ward when before the boundaries were with
the St. Charles ward, that's right.
Exactly. Different name, but some of the same constituents remembered his name and elected him.
That's right, and he lost against Scott Gillingham when the ward was reconfigured. So 2 incumbents were running against each other. Scott Gillingham won, and now Sean Dobson has now taken the ward.
And it remains to be seen if they'll both be back. Oh, let's go to Glenn Murray's headquarters. We're hearing there he's just walking in. Let's find out how he's feeling tonight. His 65th birthday, walking through his headquarters tonight. This is at the Fort Garry Hotel downtown. Glenn Murray, perhaps not the biggest smile on his face. Perhaps he feels that as we wait for that train in the last 6 polls, that it isn't the result he was hoping for tonight.
And he hasn't lost many elections. You know, if you think that he was a successful councillor, successful mayor, he lost when he ran for the Liberals federally, but then he went to Toronto and was successful for quite a while in Queen's Park, and he left before the Liberals were defeated there. So he's not someone who's had many defeats, and so this must be a painful evening for him.
If this crowd believed that he'd won this election, you would be hearing a lot of cheers, and instead that mood sounds very tentative.
Yes, and
resigned to perhaps the fact that Scott Gillingham is our mayor-elect tonight.
It looks that way, and I think there are many people in the Sean Loney camp who are thinking that Murray's got it made, and they support their favorite candidate, Sean Loney. But if people are voting strategically, I think some of them might have voted for Glenn Murray, and it'd be a different result tonight.
Well, there we hear the cheers for their charismatic politician, Glenn Murray. They're hugging his supporters. No doubt we'll hear from him. Thanks for all the work. No campaign runs on its own. Look at the team of people there tonight.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where, if this holds out and he's not elected tonight, and it looks that way, Janet, where will he go politically, and where will he go? You know, because I guess we'll hear from him now.
He is a man who, no, he's still going to wander up to the podium there and hug. We'll see how it goes. We see those orange shirts, those yellow-orange shirts.
The firefighters?
The firefighters out tonight, door knocking on election night, just doing the groundwork that is so important to getting someone a win on a night like tonight.
And the firefighters are always visible when they're part of a campaign. We saw that at the NDP leadership campaign. They show up with their shirts, and you see where they're supporting. So they punch above their weight, if I could use that expression.
They certainly do. Getting their support, having them endorse you as a candidate is considered a huge win, a huge advantage. And Glenn Murray did, as one of his promises in this campaign, said that he would meet with union leaders monthly, which is a commitment to union leaders who feel that perhaps the past administration did not listen to them as clearly as it could have.
Yeah, and he had the Winnipeg Labour Council very early in support of his candidacy, which showed that he was the union vote candidate. But the funny thing is, some people in the NDP did not move with some of that union endorsement. We saw Judy Wasilisa not supporting him, for instance, as supporting Sean Loney. So there were divisions on the left of centre as to who was their preferred candidate. Many people went to Sean Loney.
And we wonder, you wondered earlier, with Kevin Klein and Sean Loney now being household names.
Yes, that's right.
Perhaps you'd never heard of Sean Loney before, but now 14.6% of voters tonight chose him as their mayor. 14.7% chose Kevin Klein.
Yeah. And you have to remember, we have a provincial election coming up next year, and you wonder, some of these individuals who were not successful tonight, they might be looking is there something they want to do for the next provincial election?
Well, there's groundwork that they have done already. They've got their supporters, their machines. They know who to call. They know where to get their signs made, all of those little decisions. Now, interesting, we're seeing Glenn Murray right now at the Fort Garry Hotel, his election night headquarters, where he'd hoped to be holding a huge celebration party, instead choosing to go person to person tonight before taking the microphone. This is a moment where you might expect a candidate to say, I just spoke with Sean Gillingham and congratulated him. But perhaps Glenn Murray's not ready to make that phone call or that announcement at this point, because we are still waiting for the results from those 6 suburban polls that are being physically driven down to the place where they can be double checked.
You're right, Janet. And I've been in federal elections where where the candidate is actually announced as being the loser, and the candidate doing a resignation, going to the other candidate, and then it being flipped around. And so it could be that Glenn Murray is taking his time to meet with his people, and it's part of his style too as a politician, of being a one-on-one, being very approachable. When he was mayor, he was sort of a guy who would go out onto the street and interact with people. So he's a person who relates with people, and so I'm not surprised with what he's doing right now at the Fort Garry. Yeah.
Let's go to our panel with Marcia Marcusa and find out how they feel about this night of waiting.
Well, it's the long walk to the podium, and when Glenn Murray makes it there, we'll certainly get you right back there so we can hear what he has to say tonight. But I am with the Acclaim councillors tonight, Debbie Sharma and Marcus Chambers. Let's talk about the low popular vote tonight, because we're talking about it being historic, haven't seen numbers like this. I mean, last time would have been Susan Thompson, but it wasn't even as low as tonight. What is, should Scott Gillingham, officially become mayor-elect then, what does he do with that, the fact that he doesn't have a huge amount of the popular vote?
Well, it is representational of the fact that you have a centrist candidate in Glenn Murray, you have a left-leaning candidate in Sean Lowe, and then you have center-right in Mayor Gillingham, Mayor-elect Gillingham, and a far-right with Kevin Kline, and they're all very strong candidates. But it's going to be important for the mayor-elect to work collaboratively with the 15 councillors to reunite that polarization.
What are going to be, Debbie, when you think about Scott Gillingham, should he become mayor-elect? And I think we're probably looking at that trajectory, though things could change. I just want to make that clear. What will be the challenges in sort of capturing that in terms of not just the councillors, but also in terms of Winnipeggers who say, well, you're not, you won, but you didn't get my vote. So how are you going to
exactly right, Marcy. That collaboration extends not only to councillors, but the citizens of Winnipeg in each ward, and getting out in the various wards, connecting with each councillor to see what the issues are, what the platforms they ran on, and they ultimately got elected on, and making sure that things get taken care of across the city.
Is there wiggle room to move from the campaign? I think voters often wonder that. So you watch this campaign over the number of weeks, and all these promises are made, and then someone gets in. But with that low popular vote, could there be things he says, okay, another candidate got a high amount of the popular vote, maybe the ideas captured Winnipeggers' attention, maybe I'll pull back and revisit that. Does that happen?
I mean, I've only been now, this is my second term, going into my second term under Mayor Bowman. I didn't see that happening. But, it just goes to show that you have to have a mayor that does sit and listen to all of the voices that are at the table and be out in the community, as my colleague has said, to hear what's going on and to find out what the concerns of Winnipeggers are. Because if you're not representing their interest, it's going to be a tough row the next 4 years.
Now, I know that we're talking about popular vote, but I also want to ask a quick question here about taxes. And that is because should Gillingham make it become mayor-elect tonight, we've even heard in our cafe tonight people saying, I wanted to buy a house, but if Scott Gillingham gets in, my taxes are going to go up, things are so unaffordable. And do we have to raise taxes? It's a big question, but you're both city councillors. You know the books. Debbie, you've been a councillor since 2010. When you think about our finances, what are your thoughts?
Scott Gillingham certainly made the commitment, Marcy. We heard it loud and clear. I think it is concerning to a number of Winnipeggers. So I think going forward, as we set that 4-year budget, we really have to look at efficiencies. How do we move this city forward? And raising taxes is not the only way. So we'll be sitting down, as I said, there's a strategic plan coming up, and with that follows a 4-year budget. And we have to look at every department very closely.
We actually have some developing news from our desk, I understand, and we're going to go back to them for a moment. Sorry, Marcus, we will get back to you a little bit later. Janet?
We've been waiting to see and joking to see if that perhaps these 6 polls that we're waiting for the final count, if somewhere they're stuck behind a train, because, Winnipeggers, that's how we get delayed in traffic. But we're going to go to the CBC Votes Cafe right now to check in with Faith Fundal and our young voters. This is exciting. If this is one of your first elections that you've ever watched, certainly this closely, to see it be such a tight race.
Yeah, it is a very tight race. It's fascinating to watch. I know that as we wait for anything official, there are things that are on your mind. Scott Gillingham, I know, has promised to expand pilot projects that send outreach workers instead of police to low-risk mental health calls. It's something that you care very much about, right, Marshall?
I do, yeah. I go to school downtown, and previous to that I was working downtown, so I spend a lot of time there and on transit as well. Safety is a huge issue for me, and if Scott Gillingham is our mayor tonight, then I wish him all the best with his projects, and I hope that he can see what's going on downtown as the crisis it is, and it's not just a talking point.
If there was one thing that you would want Scott Gillingham to hear if he was listening to you right now, what would you want him to hear about what you want him to do?
I think addressing the needs of people in mental health crisis, people dealing with addictions, that's key to the betterment of Winnipeg in general, but certainly lowering crime.
What about you, Graham? When you look at who might be sitting in the mayor's chair, what comes up to mind for you?
Well, crime as well for me. I think.
What do you mean by crime?
Well, I suppose you could say safety downtown. That's also a big issue. Homelessness as well. I personally voted for Mr. Loney. I think what I really liked about him was just the fact that he was talking about getting to the root of issues as opposed to finding out a way to deal with the issues as they are, if that makes sense. And so I hope that that whoever the mayor is, I hope that they take that type of approach.
Well, that same question I asked about if there was one thing that Scott Gillingham would hear from you about something specific you want him to do. Do you have an answer to that?
Besides what I just said, yeah, no, I just getting to the root cause of the issues more than just than trying to fix the problems we already have, trying to get to the bottom of them more so, and try to end the issues systemically.
So what I'm hearing you say is you're talking about not dealing with the symptoms, but getting actually to what's causing those things.
To me, that's exactly it. That's what's important, I think.
As we wait, what are you thinking?
It's interesting. Between him and Glenn Murray, I didn't think it would be this close. I'm surprised. There's some drama for sure.
What about you, Marshall? Did you think it was going to be this close?
No, I didn't think it was going to be this close. I was really entertained by the way that the numbers came through tonight. That was super entertaining and dramatic. I kind of thought that in the end, Glenn Murray would be coming out on top, and he still might. We're not sure, so I'm excited to see what happens in the end.
So with bated breath, Janet, we're going to wait.
Yes, bated breath. We all have bated breath. We all want to know the answer here of exactly what is happening. We are waiting to see the results of those missing 6 polls. We've heard a lot tonight and actually through the election campaign about collaboration. And we're talking about the possibility, we've heard from some young voters that perhaps they might have voted differently had they realized that it would be such a horse race between 2 candidates. Is there a possibility that someone like Scott Gillingham could pull in some of the knowledge from Sean Loney, for example, and say, and pull in some of these people to represent more of the popular vote tonight, use their wisdom?
Well, that's true. I mean, as we were remarking earlier, to have less than 30% as your plurality victory, you do have to kind of make a point to the voters that you've got support in different ways. So I could see, a strategy of maybe having somebody like a Sean Loney being part of your senior advisors and things like that. I would see Sean Loney probably moving on in the next election, in the 2023 election. I suspect we'll see Sean Loney in some role with the NDP. Now, they've nominated most of their candidates in many ridings, so I don't know how many openings there are for Sean Loney to run for the NDP provincially, but I think we will see Sean Loney in some role in the next 2 years within the NDP provincially, or maybe even federally. But he really has elevated his stature within the political community of Winnipeg that wasn't there a year ago.
And what about Kevin Klein? What do you see for him?
Well, Kevin Klein, I suspect we'll see him in the 2023 provincial election for the Conservatives. Kirkfield Park is open because Scott Fielding has left, so that's going to be a by-election.
We're going to do it, Chris.
Sure.
We're going to do it. The CBC Decision Desk has seen enough, is ready to make the call. CBC is projecting Scott Gillingham will be the next mayor of Winnipeg. Gillingham served 2 terms as a Winnipeg City Councillor, as you know, as chair of the city's finance committee. He knows well how tough it will be to fund the major projects he wants to push forward. You hear cheers now as supporters of Scott Gillingham here were making the call for Gillingham. He told voters he would increase property taxes and frontage levies. And yet tonight, even with that pledge that you might think would be unpopular, Winnipeggers have made Scott Gillingham their next mayor. Chris, your thoughts on this tonight?
Well, as we'd heard, some of the guests who are with faith in our background of the studio, some of them were mentioning kind of like a safe decision. And I think there are people in the suburbs of Winnipeg who saw Scott Gillingham as a safe decision, who had been on a 2-term ward councillor on City Hall. had had a good election. And go ahead, Jenna.
We have Glenn Murray, who was walking through at the microphone. Let's listen in to what he has to say to his supporters.
Well, thank you very much. I want to make sure you stick around for the birthday party, because we're going to do that, okay? Well, for a few minutes there, we knew what it felt like to win. And it was exciting. And it was exciting because we've worked so hard. And when I met with so many of you before, I said, it's October 27th when we really get down to business. I want to congratulate Councillor Gillingham on his victory. I think all of us know, because it's our families and our friends who work so hard, and that's been true in all of the other camps. And let's just have a round of applause for all of the candidates who ran and all the families who ran. It's a great song by Fred Small that says, we're measured by the love we leave behind when we're gone. And I've always thought our friends and our health and those things are even more important than politics. And politics is all about taking care of our friends and families and our health and our healthy communities. And the person who takes care of me all the time is my friend Rick Nevis, my partner in life, who has an extraordinary public service in Canadian Navy and is a nurse and has been on the front lines at times when that wasn't easy for a gay guy to be. And I couldn't get through my life without him, and he has been my rock and my personal hero. And I would just like you to share a little appreciation for them. So we came together as a team, and if you look across this room, could you get a more culturally, socially, economically, employment-wise, geographically more diverse group of people behind one campaign? Just look at all of you and take a sense of pride that in building this campaign, we brought people together from every corner of the city, every walk of life, every economic class, every faith. And we did that because we want to live in a city that just isn't tolerant, but one that's celebratory of human beings and of the life of the city, and ensures that there is a seat at the table for everybody and an opportunity in the city for everybody. But I don't want you to go home feeling down tonight. We love our city. Winnipeg has been a commitment for mine, whether I was physically present or not. I have worked on projects in the city. I mean, we were working on the Human Rights Museum when I was out of town, and we were doing all kinds of things that never stopped. But I want to just say we committed ourselves to do a few things. We committed ourselves to build a dynamic new partnership with Indigenous people and to become part of joining them in reigniting this renaissance that's going on right now in the city that's giving us all hope. We got up every morning walking as we could outside today and see too many people who don't have a key to a safe place to call home, one free of violence. These things are still in my blood and in your blood, and it is our passion. And we are citizens of the city, and this whole campaign was about activating our citizenship. It wasn't about electing a mayor who knew everything, who had a solution to every problem, but a mayor and a community of people who would come together to collaborate, to take on the challenges across the city, to end poverty, to rebuild our community centers and deal with our housing crisis and rebuild our neighborhood housing. It was about becoming the leading innovation economy in the country, fuel switching, material switching, and working to become the electric vehicle and green transportation capital of Canada, if not the world. It was about getting involved in doing what each of you do every day, because you're all involved in enormous organizations that change people's lives for the better. So I'm committing to support the new mayor and council. I'm committing to work tirelessly, as all of us have, to make this city. I've got responsibilities tomorrow with my business. I've got responsibilities with the Exchange District Biz and great projects we're working on the downtown. All of you are out fundraising for organizations. All of you are out volunteering. All of you are going to get up and make a difference in the world tomorrow. All of us are going to get up, regardless of who gets elected or not, and feel very much that we are Team Winnipeg, and even our opponents in this election are part of our team as well, and we will be part of their team to create change. I have, one of my friends in the middle of the AIDS epidemic, when I lost 43 of my friends to AIDS and HIV, and people were dying, and we were dealing with the anticipation of the next person in my circle. It was a pretty dark time, and I realized that at one point in your life, you confront your own mortality. You realize that human beings are rather unusual. We're incredibly strong, we're intelligent, we have imagination. There's few creatures, well, there's no other creature quite like us on this planet. So we have to see each of ourselves as powerful and transformative and know that you make a difference. And when I was a scared gay kid, never ever thought I would be elected mayor or be able to do the things I did, I learned to get the self-confidence to find a way and to fight so I could make a productive contribution to the community. And there's so many of you here today who have walked in different shoes, but on a very similar journey, where you've often felt, and you know people who've been in the margins of this community. And often those are the people who have the least, and sometimes get the least out of the city. And that's what we've been trying to change, to make that more equitable. But let no one ever tell you that any human characteristic, anything about you, anything that you may be uncomfortable with or not sure of or makes yourself self-conscious about, nothing like that should ever stop you from fully engaging and aspiring to fulfill your dreams, become the person that you want to be, create the change you want to be, have the career you want to be, and have the choices you want to be in life. So I hope some of you were so inspired by this election campaign and the ideas that we put forward that you'll think about running for election yourself, or you'll think about taking on a different leadership role in this community. Because if you look around this room, we have more than enough people and more than enough power in this room to change the future course of the city. And while we may not be doing it exactly in the way that we had planned, that mission is no less important. And you as volunteers and citizens have made a huge difference in the last few months. And I want to thank you for that. You've taught me, you've inspired me, you've mentored me, you've challenged me, you've made me a better person. You've taught me, even at this point in my life, the things I don't know, and you've affirmed many of the things that we do agree on, that we know are right, and the importance of pursuing them. So I don't...
Our friend, Glenn Murray. Come on, folks, we want to celebrate your birthday.
I didn't finish up. So, to all of you, God bless.
An inspirational speech from Glenn Murray, conceding defeat to the man you see on the other side of your screen, Scott Gillingham, elected Mayor of Winnipeg, our Mayor-elect, Chris Adams.
Janet, that speech by Glenn Murray was a very gracious speech. He talked about the dark days of being a gay man in the 1980s and losing many of his friends to AIDS. He spoke without notes, and he spoke from the heart and spoke with empathy to his supporters. So that was one of the finest defeat speeches I've ever seen in politics. So
he is a very, very talented speaker. I loved Get Up Tomorrow and Make a Difference.
That's right, and clearly he was talking about, briefly, he talked about going back to his consultancy and had work to do tomorrow, but he's a very tired man right now, having done this for many months now, and I'm sure he'll sleep for another day or two.
Oh, and he deserves that. He's worked very, very hard, and what an emotional night as well, as the results went up and down, as we had, a call from another news organization saying that he had won when in fact he hadn't. It has been an emotional night for him and his supporters, and also for the people we are seeing tonight at the Clarion Hotel, celebrating a victory for Scott Gillingham.
And I think this is a victory of the suburbs, largely. As Bart was explaining, the counting starts in the inner city as vehicles arrive at City Hall for the count.
It looks like Scott may be about to speak. I don't see a microphone in front of him. I hope we'll be able to hear him. Oh, there is a microphone. I just can't see it. Let's listen in.
Holy smokes. What a night. What a night. Thank you to everybody for proving that hard work and perseverance and focus and dedication pays off. Before I go any further, I want tonight to acknowledge several of the other candidates who have called or acknowledged me today, and this victory tonight, I really want to appreciate. I do appreciate each one of them, and thank them so much, each one of them, for, I think, an outstanding campaign that gave Winnipeggers a lot of choice and a lot of great ideas. A lot of great ideas, I think, came from all the candidates, and I want to congratulate each one of them on their runs tonight. To every mayoral opponent in the campaign trail, we now all share a common bond. All of you have had the guts and the courage and the stamina to stand for mayor of this city. And I know the full weight now of what that means. The time away from family, the tough debates and emotional ups and downs, the countless handshakes and introductions, and the endless plates of delicious food all across this city. And so congratulations to each one of you, to Robert and Rana, to Jenny and Dawn and Glenn, to Kevin, Idris, Rick, Sean, and Chris. I know I won't be the only one that's watching and listening and reaching out if you're looking for other ways to contribute to this great city, to make Winnipeg great and make sure we have a great future. And so can we thank them and can we thank their families? And of course, tonight I'm thinking of my own family too, and I'm thrilled that they're here with me. Thank you especially to my wife, Marla. Where are you, dear? And to my children, Hannah and Andrew. To my parents, Grant and Diane. To aunts and uncles, and to my grandfather who's here somewhere, who's over, he's still building. Grandpa's over 90 years of age, and he was still building signs in his garage for this campaign. Thank you. I launched this campaign, and in my launch, my speech was focused on Winnipeg's motto, which is one with the strength of many. And the city of Winnipeg took that motto after amalgamation. The meaning is obvious. If only different cities and suburbs and communities could cooperate on common goals and on a common purpose, we could achieve great things together. But that motto also speaks to the long and diverse history of this place that we now call home. A place where First Nation and Métis leaders and traders met to seek common benefit. A place where workers, professionals, and entrepreneurs came to build a better life. A place where untold thousands of families have fled wars and oppression in faraway places to come and to raise their children in peace with the hopes of a better and brighter future. Next week, it will be my high honor to serve and to govern and to lead this city, and to build on that history with every skill that I can muster. And I recognize tonight what we all recognize, that tonight the votes were very split. This was an extremely close race. But my campaign motto has been from the start, uniting to build a stronger Winnipeg. And it will be my goal to make every effort through the coming months and years of this term to unite Winnipeg together so we can build a stronger, brighter city.
But I can only say those words tonight because I'm part of a team that came together. One team with the strength and skills and expertise and contribution of many. And to my friend, longtime friend, and campaign manager Luke Lewandowski. Where are you, Luke? Congratulations to Luke for doing an outstanding job of leading our team and managing this campaign. Thank you so much, Luke. Well done. You can sleep in 15 minutes tomorrow. And to the 3 city councillors who took a huge risk on me by endorsing me early. Re-elected Councillor Janice Lukes. Re-elected or acclaimed Councillor City Councillor Marcus Chambers. And re-elected City Councillor Jeff Brawadi. Thank you to each one of you. And I'm going to read off the names of my core campaign team who've just done a remarkable job in this campaign, and I want them to raise their hands. Hold your applause. We're going to give them a round of applause at the end. Destiny, Eric, Colin, Nemo, Scott, Jeanette, Brad, Shannon, Alex, Christy, Rogine, Dean, and Brian, and fundraising co-chairs Colleen and Rennie. Can we give them a round of applause? And to the more than 200 people, volunteers who spread the word across this city, dropping literature, putting in lawn signs, taking people to vote, making phone calls, working in the office. If you don't think dropping literature, just one more street of literature, or making just 2 more phone calls matters, tonight, the race tonight shows it matters. And I want to thank all of our donors, the financial contributors who made this fully funded campaign possible so that we could keep on the radio and keep up with billboards and digital ads and keep spreading the word. So thank you so much to all of you who made a financial contribution to this campaign. And I know that every member of my team will agree with me that ultimately the last and biggest thank you goes to the thousands and thousands of voters who voted tonight for us, to make this win possible. Without your support, it would be impossible to serve you, of course, for the next 4 years. And I want to be clear to everybody who voted for me and to everyone who did not, who I intend to serve regardless, that I didn't run to settle for status quo. I did not run to defend status quo. I ran because I believe Winnipeg can try harder, can govern smarter, and can deliver faster. To build a city that is economically stronger so we can afford responsible investments. To build a city that is socially stronger so that we can be proud and safe and walk tall. To build a city that is culturally richer so that our peers will see us and envy us. Let's unite together. Let's work together. We deserve this victory.
You hear applause, see applause there at Scott Gillingham headquarters. Applause here too. I suspect that might have been Marcus Chambers over there who was clapping along. We have the numbers in now, those 6 missing polls. Finally, 251 of 251 polls reporting and showing Scott Gillingham with 4,400 votes over Glen Murray.
It's quite something, Janet, and clearly that train moved to allow that truck of votes to make it to City Hall. I would say in some ways that suburban Winnipeg has outvoted other parts of the city. People feel that Scott Gillingham was a safe place to vote, and someone who's proved himself to be very reliable with City Council. As you saw in the speech, it's not going to cause cause people to storm the streets. He's not the most rabble-rousing guy, but he looks like a very dependable person to serve as our mayor for the next 4 years.
Let's go to the people who know him best, the people who have worked with him, the people in this room. They would be sitting with Marcy Marcusa right now. Your reaction to this election and to that speech?
Yes, let's get that. And let's remember that Marcus Chambers, who's with us here tonight, acclaimed councillor in his ward, was mentioned in that speech. You were clapping and cheering. You know Scott Gillingham, the mayor-elect. Winnipeggers don't on that personal level. What is his best personal quality that makes you excited for him tonight?
It's his integrity. He says what he's going to do and he does it. He doesn't waver. He doesn't, he's the real deal. And I'm so honored, so proud to be working with him. Now we've got to roll up our sleeves and get to work, but I'm confident that we can move our city forward. Absolutely confident that we can move our city forward.
It's interesting that in the conversation we had earlier about popular vote, both of you were talking about collaboration being one of the strengths of Scott Gillingham, and that's what you hope he was going to bring forward. We saw a lot of collaboration actually in that speech just now, in terms of him thanking everybody, talking about ideas from other candidates actually ran against him. Tell me what you would like to say directly to Scott Gillingham tonight, the mayor-elect, Debbie.
Marcy, congratulations to Councillor Gillingham, former Councillor Gillingham, no longer a city councillor, no longer member of the Executive Policy Committee, now the mayor of the city of Winnipeg. He gets to put his mark on how we're going to move forward, and I look forward to doing it with him.
Tell me what you think he'll bring to the job. Marcus Chambers, not even missing a beat, saying integrity in terms of a personal quality. Just now that we can really speak freely, give us some insight into what he's going to be like.
Well, my experience, Marcy, with him, he is a fair player and open-minded, can have open discussions. So he's not someone that's going to surprise you on the direction he's going to take. So I've had a good working relationship with him, and I think that's what can be expected. He said it now just in his statement, that he looks forward to working with everyone, supporting all residents, whether they voted for him or not. And that's what we really need to do tomorrow.
We are probably going to be heading back to Janet now, actually. So I want to thank both of you. Congratulate you once again, Janet and Chris.
I got a party to go to.
They do.
8 more minutes, Marcus. 8 more minutes, okay? It's been wonderful having their wisdom tonight. Thank you both so much. Now to Sam Sampson, who is standing by at Gillingham headquarters. Sam.
We do have Mayor-elect Scott Gillingham right here with us with CBC. Congratulations, Mr. Gillingham.
Thank you very much.
Let's start off right off the bat. Your promise is unity, City Hall and across Winnipeg. Tell me right now, how on November 1st are you going to show unity for the city?
Well, one of the first things I committed to do in my campaign is to make sure we pull all the councillors together to develop a strategic plan. And it's important that every councillor from across the 15 wards of the city has a part in building the plan for the city's future. The people of Winnipeg tonight, across the 15 wards, elected people to represent them. All of those people need to have a seat at the table and a voice in the plan we're going to build.
You've been a councillor for 8 years, chair of the finance committee for 6 years, and you ran on raising taxes in Winnipeg, and you won. What do you think that says about the state of the city right now?
Well, I think people understand, and I tried to put a clear plan in place, and I said I'll tell people how much the plan is, what the plan is going to be, how much it's going to cost, and how we're going to pay for it. And I've said as well, with the changes the province has made to the education tax, even with the tax increases, most Winnipeggers will be paying less in property taxes in the coming years. But now's the time to invest in Winnipeg. Now's the time to grow our city and see our economy grow as well. And I believe that Winnipeggers took that message to heart, and I'm really honored tonight to have been elected.
This was a very, very close race. As you know, there was a little bit of back and forth going on for a while. What do you say to the Winnipeggers who did not vote for you?
Well, my commitment is that, again, my campaign platform, my goal is uniting to build a stronger Winnipeg. I am here to serve everybody, those who voted for me, those who didn't vote for me. I want to be a mayor that serves and unites this city so that we can be stronger together and build the kind of city that our children want and the kind of city that our grandchildren want as well.
Thank you very much. And you have your own grandchildren here today. Your family is here, your grandfather is here. We really appreciate your time. Mayor-elect Scott Gillingham.
Thank you, Sam.
Back to you.
Thank you, Sam Sampson and Mayor-elect Gillingham. Now to Marcy Marcusa just for some final thoughts.
Well, let's get final thoughts from our acclaimed councillors tonight. Once again, congratulations, Marcus Chambers. What would you like to share before we're off here tonight?
I just want to say to the residents of St. Norbert, St. River, thank you for your confidence in me. I'm up for another 4 years and ready to get to work.
And Devi Sharma?
Marcy, it was a pleasure to be here with you. I think I got my dose of excitement for the month, as all Winnipeggers just did. And just a lovely evening here at CBC. And the way I begun, again, namaskar and sat sri akal.
Great to have you both with us. Congratulations, and we'll see what next week will bring. And so I guess we're all headed for Mayor-elect Scott Gillingham. That means Patio City, here we come. But first, you guys off to celebrate. Janet?
Well, I wonder if the young voters who joined us tonight for our Winnipeg Votes Cafe might enjoy those patios. Let's go to Faith Fundal and the wonderful panel of people, the group he's had with us tonight.
Janet, we're going to ask one simple question. What do you need from Mayor-elect Gillingham and his council?
Better shelter for the homeless.
Safer Winnipeg transit.
Crime, both prevention and community outreach.
So there we have it. What folks here in the cafe think. Maraming salamat. Back to you, Janet.
Faith, thank you. Wonderful work tonight. Thank you so much, Cafe, everything you've brought to us. Chris Adams, what a night. We started talking about how this could be a dramatic, tight race, but I never anticipated such a dramatic, tight race.
I agree, Janet. You know, I thought, when you look at the Quebec provincial election, 20 minutes into the election, we knew who had won, right? We didn't know until just a short while ago as to who was really the mayor-elect. So it's been quite an evening. So thanks, Janet, for having me join you.
Well, we are at the beginning of something new for our city. You can say that Scott Gillingham has had 2 terms as a councillor, but this is his first time taking on the role of mayor of Winnipeg. What do you think he needs to do first as his role?
Well, I think that he won with less than 30%, right? So he's got to make sure that the city's behind him. But I think he's got to reach out to the premier. And that relationship between the mayor and the premier is critical for the well-being of the city. So I expect we'll see that. We'll also see him reaching out to the Indigenous folks. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs just elected a new chief as of today. Yes. So there'll be people in our community of all different backgrounds. And his speech today talked about the diversity of our community. So I think that he will be reaching out to all of them as well as to the premier tomorrow.
Now, interesting, of course, we will have a provincial election next year as well in October.
That's right. I'm guessing it'll probably be a spring election, so right after the provincial budget this spring. So we might see some of these candidates who didn't make it through today, we might see them in 6 or 8 months' time.
It's a fairly quick turnaround then to the spring.
It is. So maybe we'll be back again on this very table.
Well, I certainly hope so.
Yeah, me too.
It has just been a joy to spend this exciting evening analyzing things with you. Thank you so much for your wisdom.
I'll be the Robin to your Batman.
Do we get the capes?
Yeah.
Do we get the belts with the stuff? I want to thank you all for watching this evening. It has been an absolute joy to be here with you. Thank you for getting out and voting. Thank you for choosing to stay with CBC. Thank you to our hardworking crew, all the people in the control room and the decision desk who you haven't seen yet this evening. Everyone has been working very hard. They deserve a round of applause. Marcy Marcusa tomorrow morning on Information Radio with Mayor-elect Scott Gillingham. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow night at 6 on CBC Winnipeg News. All the best. Take care and be safe.